1 minute till broadcast, and we are now streaming. 30 seconds till intro sequence. Intro sequence is playing now. We're live.
Good afternoon. Happy Thursday to Durham, North Carolina, Bull City. I would like to welcome you all to the Durham City Council work session. This is the 10th day of March 2022 here at 1:00 p.m. and we are in our chambers today, but we certainly want to welcome all of you here who are attending remotely as well. I will now turn our attention to our clerk. And Madam Clerk, good afternoon to you. Will you please call our roll?
Mayor O'Neill,
I am present.
Mayor Pro Tempore Middleton,
I am here.
Councilmember Caballero,
Here.
Councilmember Freeman,
Present.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We will now turn our attention to any announcements that any of our members of council may happen to have at this time. Mayor Pro Tem Middleton.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members, fellow colleagues, and to everyone watching around the city and around the country. It's good to be here this afternoon with you all. Firstly, Madam Mayor, just a couple of housekeeping matters. One, I'd like to, just for a few moments on the other matters at the end of the meeting, update the council and the public on our plans on moving forward with filling the vacant seat, the seat that was just recently vacated by our friend and colleague, Councilmember Charlie Reese. And that should only take a few minutes on the other matters to update the council. Secondly, Madam Mayor, next week, we're going to cross a major threshold in our city in that our guaranteed income pilot will be sending out its first checks next week. This is a huge star in the crown of Durham. And I met with Sarita Hill, who is the executive director of Step Up Durham, and our own Amber Wade, who has been championing this cause for us and quarterbacking our efforts. This is a big threshold that we're crossing. I think it's appropriate that at some point, Ms. Hill, Sarita Hill and Amber come and address the council and give us a briefing. I was going to recommend our next council meeting and ask for consent, next work session and ask for consent to do that, but I know, Madam Mayor, you've been looking at the docket and the work schedule of the next work session. So I would just put that on record that at some point in the near future, I would like for Sarita Hill and Amber Wade to come forward and give us an update as we are getting ready to send checks out for our guaranteed income pilot. Finally, Madam Mayor, just by way of celebration, I want to congratulate our fellow council member, Jillian Johnson, who was just recently elected the co-chair of Local Progress. This is a huge achievement on her part. She is the first Black, openly LGBTQ person to serve as co-chair of Local Progress, and this further goes to prove that wherever Durham is, we lead. Whenever Durham is in the room, we're going to be running things. So I want to send out congratulations to Councilmember Johnson as she leads this very important organization and voice in the nation's public square. So congratulations, Councilmember Johnson. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate it.
Yes, Councilwoman Johnson. I'm sorry, Caballero.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to give the public a very brief update on where we are with ARPA funding. I know that lots of our stakeholders and community residents are starting to email council. We're taking all of your queries and questions very carefully. Council is in the process, and we are going to be reconvening a special meeting, I think probably the first week of April. I know that Councilmember Williams and Mayor O'Neill are traveling to Florida the last week of March. And so we think after they're back, we will be pulling together a special meeting so we can choose our path forward. So I ask for patience in this process and appreciate that we've been given a lot of latitude by our public, and I look forward to that special meeting with my colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well with your work on this. Are there any other announcements? Members of council. First, then I'd like to offer my congratulations to Councilwoman Johnson as well, who's always been a leader. So go Durham again. We always show up and we always lead and do it well. I think Councilman Williams has an announcement, and then I'll have an update sort of on our COVID position in regards to our task force and commissions.
Hey, thank you, Mayor, and go Jill. Congratulations. This morning, did you want to talk about that? Or? This morning, Mayor O'Neill and I had the honor of attending Raise the Roof. It's a nonprofit that pretty much builds homes for our wounded warriors, our military veterans, and Staff Sergeant Michael Kosher is the recipient who gets to call Durham home. He was injured at war, and it was really emotional to hear him reflect on those days and his perspective on now the Ukraine situation. But we had the opportunity to be there, and it was just so graceful to be in that space with him as they opened that. They opened the doors today as they are completing the build out. This veteran will be able to call Durham home. He discovered Durham a little while ago when he wanted to find out what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. He wants to be a physical education teacher. And so instead of traveling to other parts of the state, he decided to come right here to NCCU. And he's the Eagle Pride Amplified. And he is going to call Durham home, and I'm so grateful that we were able to be there. Mayor, we had a good time.
Yeah, it was an awesome experience. It really was. And I was so glad to be in that space to honor men and women and families who sacrifice so much for us to enjoy the freedoms that we have today. That is something that we can never take for granted. The sacrifices of our military and armed services personnel and their families, and just honored to be in that space with them and to see them and see the new home. We've been invited back, I think, on June the 16th when they were actually have the opening. We also, Councilman Williams and I have also issued them an invitation to attend NCCU's homecoming in November so that we can have a good time at the homecoming together. So it was a great way to start the day. I do want to let you all know that I talked with our Public Health Director, Rod Jenkins, in regards to the status of in-person meetings for our commissions and committees and various task forces. And as you know, the mask mandate was lifted. As you see, we are back in chambers and we are still wearing our mask. And so the mask mandate has gone away. We're back to putting things, moving forward towards normalcy, whatever that means after COVID. But we are asking and advising that you still wear your mask if you so choose to meet in person, and if you are going to meet in person as a task force or a committee, that will be done on the individual basis as to your task force as a group, whether you will decide to meet in person or whether you will continue to meet virtually. As you see, we've decided as a group to meet in person, but we are still masked, and we will ask that you do the same, but of course we are not demanding that. It is definitely a discretionary choice at this point. It is my understanding in talking with our clerk this morning that we don't really have the capacity to hold hybrid meetings for all of our task force and commissions. That means you could come into a space in city, for example, if you have been using a space within City Hall, we don't really have the ability at this point in time for you to do a hybrid meeting. So your committee or task force would need to make a decision as a group. However you so choose, whether you will remain virtual or whether you will come back in a space, and then we would then advise, if you do decide to come back into that space, that you still adhere to safety precautions as you deem necessary, but we would advise that you remain masked and you honor social distancing protocols. We will now move to our first order of business this afternoon, which are going to be our priority items, and I will first recognize our city manager for any priority item that she may have.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor O'Neill, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, and members of the Durham City Council. I do have 2 priority items for you this afternoon. Agenda item number 5, the Durham City-County interlocal agreement for continuation of the gang reduction strategy. The item was updated to include the correct attachments. Agenda item number 9, Durham County Transit Plan update. That will be a 15-minute presentation. And attachment number 3, the presentation was modified by Durham County Transit staff to clarify terminology from preferred alternative to recommended plan, from fiscal year 2023 work plan to fiscal year 2023 work program. The percentages for operating projects on slide number 7 was also changed to reflect consistency between Go Triangle and Go Durham. That would be all I have this afternoon for priority items.
All right, now you have now heard the manager's priority items, and I am ready to entertain a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Second.
I think it has been moved by Councilwoman Freeman and seconded by Councilwoman Johnson. And now we are ready for our vote. I believe this afternoon, are we voting? We are voting by ayes. Madam Clerk, if you will call the roll.
Mayor O'Neill,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tempore Middleton,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
and Councilmember Williams.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the ayes have it, and the motion passes unanimously. We will now recognize our Assistant City Attorney
Good afternoon.
for any priority items. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. The City Attorney's Office has no priority items.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you this afternoon being with us. And we now will recognize our City Clerk for any priority items.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I do have a couple questions about the attendance policy for boards, committees, and commissions. In the guidelines, it said that we were not requiring a certain absentee. We weren't requiring the boards, committees, and commissions to take attendance and to worry about the absenteeism. So now that we're reverting back to our normal operations, do you want the bylaws that are established for each board to require the attendance that's necessary for that board?
I will open that up for discussion among council, since this will be my first consideration of that. Let me listen a little bit. as
Madam Mayor, if I
I've
might.
done it.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are you posing that for the council to take that up within this meeting as a?
I would like a discussion on that to see if the board should revert back to their original attendance policies, or if we should continue with the guidelines for virtual meetings saying that we are not considering absenteeism.
Why don't we add that to other matters? At the
Okay.
end of the meeting, we'll have a brief discussion about that. With
Okay,
your
that's
permission,
fine.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Is that fine with you all? I'm open to that, and that'll give us a few minutes to kind of twirl it around in your mind. Think about it a minute. All right. Madam Clerk, you have anything else for a priority item? All right, we'll come back to that discussion. I'm now going to move to our second order of business and basically read through our agenda today, starting with our administrative consent items. We have item number 1, which is the Durham City County Appearance Commission appointments.
I'd like to pull that, please.
We also have item number 2, the Audit Services Oversight Committee 2021 Annual Report. Item number 3, ACRA Fitz Powell Affordable Rental Preservation Grant Agreement.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to pull this, but I do want to just briefly say on the record that this is an example of our affordable housing funds derived from the bond actually being able to be connected to something concrete. I know a lot of people in the public have wondered not only when we were going to float the debt, but what we were going to do with it and when we would start spending it. So I do just want to congratulate staff and point out that this is a concrete example of monies from that affordable housing bond that the voters of our city passed overwhelmingly a few years ago, actually being operationalized. And just wanted to point that out on the record. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'd also move now to item 4, which is,
Mayor, I'd like to ask a few questions on that.
you would like to have that pulled?
Yeah, just briefly.
All right.
Is that 4 or 3?
Number 4? Okay. Let me read it into the record. Item number 4, which has been pulled by Councilman Williams, is the amendment number 1 to contract number 17648 with moss+ross LLC for communications consulting services. Item number 5, the Durham City County Interlocal Agreement for continuation of the gang reduction strategy. Item number 6 is a resolution authorizing the virtual city auction. Item 7, contract SW-87 Bragtown Sidewalk Improvements 2022.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to pull that item, but I just want to highlight, I know that the residents of Bragtown have been eagerly awaiting some of these improvements, and it's good to see this contract before us, and glad that their advocacy is working out so well for them.
I'd like to echo that. That one brought a smile to my face. I think it brought a smile to everybody's faces. So very good. Thank you so much for pointing.
Madam Mayor, also, I think we may have some volume issues. Okay, good.
We do?
We have some constituents messaging in, so.
All right, do I need to give you a second and we'll just do a double check? Okay. That's a hold up for a second. What did she say?
She said it's only occurring on Zoom. Only on Zoom.
Only on Zoom. Okay. You ready for me to proceed or not? Yes. Sure. Everybody else know. We're taking a slight pause. There are some issues, technical issues that are happening on Zoom, so give us a moment. Technology is not perfect. All right, I think we're back on, and just to kind of pick up, to make sure that everybody heard, I'm going to start and read the administrative consent items again. Number one, the Durham City County Appearance Commission appointments, that has been pulled by Councilwoman Johnson. Item number two is the Audit Services Oversight Committee, the 2021 annual report. Item three is ACRA ACRA Fitzpowell Affordable Rental Preservation Grant Agreement. Item number four has been pulled by Councilman Williams, which is the amendment number one to contract number 17648 with moss+ross LLC for communications consulting services. Item number five is the Durham City County Interlocal Agreement for continuation of the gang reduction strategy. Item number six, which is a resolution authorizing the virtual city auction. Item number seven, which we're all excited about, is a contract SW-87 Bragtown Sidewalk Improvements 2022. And then we will have presentations, which is item number 8, both from the Department of Transportation. The first is the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail GTCR study update. That'll be about a 30-minute presentation. The second will be the Durham County Transit Plan update, which will last about 15 minutes. We also have on our agenda under public hearings, item number 10, public hearing on the FY 2022-23 budget and FY 2023-2028 capital improvement plan. Item 11 is the consolidated annexation, Carver Street assemblage. Item 12, the consolidated item, TROSA main campus expansion. We also have a citizen to be heard, which is item number 13, Mr. Andrew McDonald. And I believe that will conclude our agenda up to the point of settling our agenda, and we do have a couple of other items as well. So, Madam Manager, here's what I have for the pool items. I have item number 1, pulled by Councilwoman Johnson, which is our commission appointments, and item number 4. Is that what you have?
That is what I have, Madam Mayor.
All right. We will now turn to our citizen matters. And I believe we have one citizen here today. That's what I have, and that is Mr. Andrew T. McDonald. And we will see if he's here and available. Mr. McDonald of Divine Trust Ministries, you will have 3 minutes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I just want to thank you so much, council members. And it was very exciting to hear everything that's going on and how Durham is in the lead on many things. Just briefly, this may be the wrong forum, and I would love to have known that I could be there personally just to say thank you. But my background is a 20-year trial attorney. And at the end of that, I surrendered to heroin addiction and an alcohol problem. And my faith journey started about 8 years ago in Louisiana and Texas when I didn't think sobriety was possible. I found the Lord in that process. And my life today is all about service. I was blessed to serve in the the Dream Center of Southeast Texas, and I had no idea what that was. It's based off of the Dream Center in LA, and the man that did recovery actually taught in Los Angeles for 15 years, and his wife did sex trafficking. So we opened up a closed prison, and by the end of that, we were feeding upwards of 2,000 families a month, and we'd converted the closed prison to serve 90 men in recovery, and now the women's program. And I was called up to Raleigh because they wanted to start residential programming after doing food subsidy for the last 7 years. And with this last year with Raleigh, we served 2 million meals, and we now have a men's recovery program that took 7 men off park benches in Moore Square that are now teaching the steps of starting their own companies and giving back to the community. And the Lord put on my heart to see, because we're willing, to find other areas in need. And if there's any other dilapidated properties or stuff that can be leased or condemned or stuff that needs rehabilitating, to just say hello, because we are in the business of residential programming and helping to encourage and find broken people renew their purpose, identity, and productivity in our society. And it's the greatest gift. And I think it's what life is all about. And any way we can help or assist in that regard, from programs such as veterans, substance abuse, men and women, sex trafficking, marginalized youth, we're here. And so I wanted to make an introduction. I'm sure you all, if there's any interest or need, have subcommittees that might be wonderful for me to talk to or connect with or serve. And we hope to make an impact in Raleigh, or in Durham one day. Hopefully in the near future, if that's a potential. But I did see my first Durham Bulls game in the last year, and I did visit the city, and I've heard wonderful things about the Durham Rescue Mission. In fact, one of the guys in our program had his first real impactful experience in recovery at the Durham Rescue Mission. So I'm excited, and I just want to thank you all for what you do as service to your community and leaders in your community, and hopefully can have further discussions or direction to other committees.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for being here today and for your comments, sir. We will now return to our pulled items, beginning with item number 1, which is the Durham City County Appearance Commission appointments. Councilwoman Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to make a couple quick comments before we got to the end where we tally up the votes. When I first learned about this commission, I think that every member on it was a white man. We've had we put some real effort into increasing diversity on the commission and have re-advertised positions multiple times in order to get more diverse applicants. And it seems like we've done a really good job as regards to race, but that we are struggling with regard to gender. There are currently no women on the board, and there's one woman who's applied who was recommended, which is really great. I'm excited to support her as well as the reappointment, but just wanted to make the argument that we re-advertise for that 3rd seat in order to try to get more of a gender balance. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there any disagreement with re-advertising for that from anyone? Seeing none, thumbs up, everybody? Thumbs up. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will re-advertise. Thank you so much for keeping an eye on that. Yeah, but not an eye for details. We now return to item number 4, which is the amendment number 1 to contract number 17648 with moss+ross LLC for communications consulting services. Councilman Williams, you now have the floor, sir.
Thank you. This will be really quick. I know of the work that moss+ross does and the work that they do, and it's really good. I just had a question about engagement. Are we, just as in other entities where we partner with universities on medical research or other matters of research, are we entertaining the idea to partner with maybe communications departments with our local universities? And that's not to totally replace an outside contract, but it's just, I'm just wondering if we ever do that. And I guess whoever it is, staff, resource person, Karen Lotto? Or anyone who can answer that question?
Well, Karen, go ahead. Yes, sir, and Mr. Johnson, if you want to add on, please go ahead. So I would say, council member, that we did not or have not looked at communications departments for this activity. That is a good suggestion and something we can definitely look about how to amplify this work. And a lot of what we need done is kind of fee for service, communication support, but we could certainly look into how we amplify what we're proposing with additional support from academic departments. And I'll defer to Mr. Johnson on further clarification.
That is correct. We'll talk with them about their engagement with the communications departments and possible opportunities to engage them from our local universities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is not to delve into cutting anyone's private enterprise. It's just more so being innovative around just the rich community of resources we have here at Durham. Thank you.
If I might add, I'm Beverly Thompson, Director of Communications. We have worked with the NCCU Communications Department several times and had freelancers actually help with this particular broadcast for council meetings. So we do have a relationship with the Mass Communications Department and have enjoyed working with them.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gaines, this is Reginald Johnson, Community Development Department. I would also add that the Community Development Department has worked with NCCU Department of Communications in the past, actually for our advertisements for Southside, the actual actors and actresses and the development of the promotion that was run on what was Time Warner at the time was developed by NCCU Communications Department.
That's really great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Madam Mayor, that'll be all.
Thank you, Councilman Williams, and thank you to our able staff as well.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I thank Councilmember Williams for pulling the item. I was actually going to pull the item as well and had a couple of notes. Firstly, I just want to just kind of to historically reminisce, just stress how important communication was before this bond was passed, and the Herculean lift of making sure that our residents and citizens and stakeholders were fully informed, and really the salesmanship that went into this bond when it was passed. And it's just as important after its passing and as we start to float debt and spend money on it, that we stay just as engaged and vigilant and intense in our efforts to do communication. I was curious because one of the items in the scope of work for this contract was meeting with elected officials as well. And if I missed it, forgive me. I don't recall having any meetings with anybody from moss+ross, and we didn't have during our budget retreat, kind of an update on the Forever Home, the housing, what's going on with our affordable housing bond and Forever Home, and that's fine. But this does provide me an opportunity. I'm wondering how much of the and I'm going to support. By the way, I'm supporting expanding the contract. This is necessary. But I did want to ask a question about how many elected officials were actually met with, and if there are talking points as we move forward. I'd be curious to get a refresh. Also, besides coming to the website to see any testimonials about folk that have been impacted by this, is the next iteration of this contract, as a regular citizen, one who's not in City Hall and who reads the kind of internal communications, am I going to be seeing commercials or hearing radio ads or seeing things in the newspaper, or is this just kind of communication if I have to touch the city in order to see it, come to our website, look for it, or is some of this going to be in digital ads or print ads? What is the footprint going to look like moving forward for a regular resident or citizen who's not kind of reading the city's internal memos? And if you could speak to also the elected officials that have been met with as well.
So, Council Member again, Reginald Johnson, Director of the Department of Community Development. So one of the things that moss+ross and the French West Bond did initially on the first phase of the contract was to develop a communications plan. They actually interviewed persons I can't speak to, and we might have them on the line now, to each and every council member, but they did speak to some council members. Can't just speak to each one. They also spoke to several community groups and community residents as they developed the communications plan. The website is just one piece of the communications plan. Of course, in the interim of this work, we were struck by this thing called COVID, but they are supposed to design print media. We actually have talked about one of the most popular ways that people in our community like to receive communication is simply through the mail. And so we have discussed that, but they also help with interviews for electronic media, but also we'll be working with print media and also work with community groups. They've actually helped supported us with talking points and staff for meeting with groups, which has happened during COVID. And I look forward to coming out to groups when we start meeting back in person.
Thank you. That's helpful. So moving forward, as we come out of COVID, we're going to start to see this expanded kind of presence on the internet, print media, and who were these talking points given to? Was it just staff, or who was given these talking points?
Well, I've done several interviews and they've helped me with talking points. If you want talking points, we'll be glad to provide them at any time.
Yeah, sure. Well, sure. But that's the impression I got from the contract, that was what was going to happen. So internet. I think that's it. I think that's all my questions for this matter, Mayor. I am glad to hear that moving forward, if we're going to be pouring more money into this contract, that we will see a more expanded, because I still get questions from folks in the community about, the affordable housing bond. One of the reasons why I wanted to highlight an earlier item, that this was a direct example, an example of concrete, a concrete line that you could draw, or I guess I should say a solid line that you could draw from the Affordable Housing Fund's actual policy in action on the part of the city. But I'll follow up with any more questions, and I'd certainly like to talk to them and get the advantage of those talking points as well moving forward. But I will be supporting the extension of the contract per the administration's request. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All right, I believe we are now at a point of our presentations, and we have two. We have the same resource person, Mr. Tom Devlin, and we'll start with item number 8, which is the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail GTCR study update, and that will be followed by item 9, the Durham County Transit Plan update. Mr. Devlin, you have the floor, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. This is Sean Egan, Director of Transportation. I'm going to just quickly introduce the President and CEO of Go Triangle, Chuck Latuka, who can then introduce his team and move right into the presentation. And then we can come back at the end and move into the next item, which will be led by Ellen Beckman, the Transportation Manager for Durham County. So Chuck, do you want to come on screen and introduce yourself and your team?
Sure, thanks, Sean. I think my video has been stopped by the host. Not sure if you guys can hear me.
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
How you doing today?
Oh, here we go, here we go. I think that should be starting here in a second. You'll probably
you're on.
You're on, good, thank you. So thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. With me today, I have a member of my staff, Erin Convery. She's one of our planners. I have Mariah Ellington and Monica Barrow from our consultant, STV, and they will be assisting with the presentation today. So, who's controlling the presentation?
I think I can share my screen. Give me 1 sec.
Good, thank you. And thank you, Sean, for the introduction. We work very closely with Sean Egan all the time on many issues. And more recently, I'd like to thank Sean for his help and participation in us putting a bus operator recruitment trailer down at the Durham station, which we're going to activate hopefully next week.
We're hiring.
We're hiring folks because we have
That's
jobs.
right. Hiring bus operators.
Exactly.
Great job opportunity.
It
Go
is.
DurhamTransit.org.
That's right. Go Durham and Go Triangle will be recruiting for operators and other folks too. So this is good. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We're going to do a update for the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Study, which has been going on for a couple of years now, and it's almost done. So it's we're going to update you here where we are today, and hopefully be back to you soon with the finished product. Next slide. The area of study is West Durham to Clayton in Johnston County. The area of study has 15 stops that are they're being considered for stations. A third of them are in Durham, and along with the rest are in either Wake and there's one in Johnston County. Next slide. So we've been working very closely with our study partners. This is Durham County, Johnston County, Wake County, Campo, DCHC, of course, North Carolina, DOT, and North Carolina Railroad. This is the project team that is overseeing the study on the government side, and it's been a good collaboration. Very good comments have been received as we provide updates to on the study to these folks. There's other folks involved here too. I think Sean comes to our meetings, and we've gotten great feedback. And this study could not have gone forward without the partnership that was established here at the beginning. Next slide. So the current, where we are in the study, we've been doing for the last 2 years, almost 2 years, we've been looking at the locations for stops, the schedule, the infrastructure. There's a lot of challenges in Durham, some in Cary, and even some in Raleigh. At Raleigh Station, there's some engineering challenges that need to be overcome. We're trying to make sure that we bring a solid estimate to each of the bodies that have to vote on the plan and the councils in the different cities where the commuter rail is going to operate. So everybody has some very good upfront knowledge about what the cost could be, what the engineering challenges are, what do we have to do in order to gain the capacity in the system in order to operate the number of trains that we're considering right now, which is about 40 train trips a day. And we are working very closely with North Carolina Railroad and Norfolk Southern Railroad to model the capacity. There's about 60 or 70 freight trains that run through this corridor on the single track that goes through the NCR corridor every week. There's Amtrak trains, and there's the Piedmont Regional train that Amtrak operates for NCDOT. And so there's a lot of activity here. We want to make sure there's what we plan is going to fit and is feasible. We're also looking at what the opportunities are for housing and jobs and land use. There's some very good news here. I think when we bring the final study to you, and I think you'll see that there's going to be some very positive impacts if this project were to move forward. And we're also very heavily engaged in reaching out to the public. We've had 3 rounds of public engagement. We're in the 3rd round right now. We've been talking to many businesses, not-for-profits, colleges. We recently met with Duke University. We plan to meet with many more over the next couple of months. We've held focus groups and surveys, and we've met with most of the local governments, including this council. And we're going to keep coming back and giving you updates, especially when we get the study finished. And we've also been working with the host railroad, NCRR, and the other folks that are in there with Norfolk Southern. So it's been a lot of engagement. And I think that we're going to continue our engagement. Matter of fact, we just opened up an office. Well, we opened up a few months ago an office on Foster Street to help engage the community in Durham. So we have some special emphasis there. Next slide.
Excuse me, President Latuka, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Mayor Pro Tem Middleton. On what is in the current study slide, I was looking for a legend. There's 91% green, 7%, I guess, red, 2% blue. What do those numbers mean? 91, what does that green mean?
Oh, you know, I think that was, that's reflective of the engagement that we did in the form of a survey in the fall of 2020, where we virtually put out a survey, and we received 2,700 participants in the survey with 5,000 comments. And this was a measure of the positivity of the comments. So we had a 91% positivity on the comments. Again, this was not a study to show we approve or disapprove of commuter rail. This was a study to show, you know, the gain an assessment of people's knowledge. But from that study, we did receive a lot of positive comments. 7% were negative, and I'm not sure if the 2% were more neutral or undefined, but I think that's what that chart refers to. And we could provide you the results of the study where all of this is contained. Be happy to send it to you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just one follow-up on that slide.
Yes.
Just acknowledge it. I noticed under your opportunity analysis, it lists affordable housing. And I just want to make sure that it's clear there's a distinction between housing affordability and affordable housing. And it would be nice to know exactly what you mean by affordable housing.
So this is we engaged TJCOG to do some of the study work for us when it came to housing and access to jobs. We have more detail on that and be happy to provide that. When we talk about affordable housing or legally binding housing, that we have some measurements for all the housing that's within 1 mile of the corridor, either side of the corridor. And 30% of the affordable housing is within in the study area is within 1 mile of the corridor. And that's just to show the relationship of the affordable housing and where the commuter rail line runs, and also the proximity to where the stations are. And this is one of the studies that this is one of the things that we'll be bringing to you. This is a very large study, and we'll be bringing this into you, to talk about the opportunity analysis. We'll bring folks from TJCOG in to go through their results. Any other questions? The next slide, please. So we're putting it all together and hopefully be out with the next couple of months with the end of the feasibility study that will show the results of the Norfolk Southern modeling of the infrastructure and what they're going to require of the project sponsors to do in order to get the amount of capacity we need to run the trains. So we have information back from Norfolk Southern. We are studying what they're asking us to do and what the cost of what that is. That might be putting in additional track and a new bridge, extending the tracks out past the end points. But everything we need to do to ensure that everybody else can operate in the corridor as they do today in the future with the new commuter rail project if it's built. Again, we're going through the capital costs. We just updated the regional model for ridership. We'll be bringing the ridership statistics to you and also the potential funding from FTA. It's the expectation at this point is that the federal government would be a 50-50 partner with the local governments in funding this the capital cost. And then we'll also be bringing to you the opportunity analysis, which I mentioned before, that TJCOG is doing for us. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Mariah Ellington now, and Mariah is going to go through some very interesting design concepts. I think you'll be very pleased with some of the concepts that have been developed so far. I think they improve pedestrian and bike connections, improve the roadway infrastructure, especially when it comes to you having where the low bridges are and trucks have problems, and also what the potential look of having another 1 or 2 tracks coming through Durham, and how that would impact the community. So I'll turn it over to Mariah Ellington from STV. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm Mariah Ellington with STV. I'm the engineering lead for the Durham task, and I'll be going over the design concepts that we have developed so far through downtown. And then Aaron Convery with Go Triangle will talk about next steps. Next slide, please. So as Chuck talked about, this project runs along an existing railroad corridor, which currently carries freight traffic and intercity trains, passenger trains. This project is a little bit different from what you might have seen on the Durham Orange Light Rail project, because commuter trains can operate entirely within the railroad corridor, whereas the light rail had to be adjacent to it. And that adjacency created a larger footprint than what we're talking about here today. That said, commuter rail does require additional infrastructure. And through downtown, that comes in the form of a second track. And we wanted to take a really close look at the downtown area to make sure we had a viable way to add that second track through an area that we already know is highly complex. And before we move forward with the commuter rail project, we want to make sure we have an acceptable engineering solution that can be built at a reasonable cost. And based on the work that we've done to date, we feel like we have a couple of workable solutions here, which I'll go over with you today. Next slide, please. All right, the existing conditions through Durham are extremely tricky. The topography or the general lay of the land is very complicated and changes quickly. The railroad corridor itself is very curvy and very tight. Development occurs right up against its edges. And there are significant cultural resources that have been adversely impacted by infrastructure projects in the past. There's a whole lot to talk about just regarding existing conditions. So in the interest of time, we've provided a link to a tour through it's a video tour through downtown Durham, where we talk about the existing challenges that we're facing and how they steered us towards certain concepts. I highly recommend this to give you a better understanding of why we are where we are right now. Next slide, please. So when we began the downtown Durham task, we made a list of goals that we wanted to accomplish. First up, obviously, we've got to add that second track in order to have capacity for the additional commuter trains. And while we're at it, we'd like to improve the clearance underneath the railroad bridges. That would minimize the chances that they're struck by trucks, which has happened quite a bit through Durham in the past. We'd like to improve pedestrian and cyclist mobility across the corridor while limiting impacts to the bus service. We'd also like to enhance that intermodal connection between the Durham bus station and the train station to make it better and faster than it is today. And we always try to minimize impacts to roadways and historic structures. And we have to do all of this while complying with Norfolk Southern CSX, NCRR, and NCDOT requirements. Next slide, please. So previous studies along this corridor have all assumed low-level platform boarding options, like you see on the right there. These do require some assistance for passengers using mobility devices. This is a very common approach for passenger rail projects all across the country that occur on corridors that are shared with freight traffic, like ours is. But based on feedback from the City of Durham, as well as Go Triangle's Accessibility Services Advisory Committee, we looked into what it would take to put in high-level platforms with unassisted boarding for all passengers in Durham. Now, it's important to recognize that on a corridor like ours, which is shared with freight traffic, which is highly complicated, like I talked about before, with development right up against its edges, that high-level platforms are not easy. Freight trains cannot run directly adjacent to a high-level platform. So in our corridor, we have to provide station tracks or passenger train only tracks in addition to the freight tracks. And you'll see when we look at the high-level layouts, those have a much larger footprint and they have more impacts and costs associated with them. Now, at the same time we're talking to you guys about this, we're also talking to NCRR, who is the owner of the corridor, about how these different station layouts might fit in with their overall vision of the future of their corridor. And as we start to engage with funding partners about delivering a project that comes at a reasonable cost, it's going to be very important to talk about trade-offs and risks and costs associated with these different ways to provide a system that is convenient and accessible to all users. Next slide, please. So when we began developing our concepts, we initially identified 6 and began just to start talking about the strengths and weaknesses around them. And then we had extensive stakeholder engagement with the City of Durham, County of Durham, Downtown Durham, Inc., NCDOT, and NCRR. And through all these discussions, those initial 6 got refined, and we got a whole slew of new concepts to look at. 2 concepts out of this list rose to the top as having the best ability to meet our goals with the fewest impacts. Concept 2 was the best of the low-level platform options, and concept D was the best of the high-level options. Next slide. So rather than show you a bunch of complicated engineering drawings, we developed some visualizations to give you a better picture of what these concepts might look like. And we'll start at Chapel Hill Street. Here you can see the bus station on the left, the train station on the right, and there is a single track out there today. Next slide, please. Concept 2 adds a second track along with a second platform to go with it. And you'll see a cartoony pedestrian bridge there. It's cartoony because no architectural decisions have been made yet. But we did want to make it abundantly clear that a grade-separated pedestrian connection will be needed between these platforms because we cannot cross at grade on this corridor between station platforms. Now, while it's not shown on this picture, there is the potential to make a direct connection between the bus station and this pedestrian bridge. Next slide, please. Concept D obviously has a larger footprint, and that is to provide those station tracks for high-level platforms. Here again, we have a grade-separated pedestrian connection between the platforms, and here also there is the potential for a direct connection between the bus station and the pedestrian bridge. Next slide. So most people don't see the corridor from drone height, so we have some ground shots here for you to look at. On the left in the background is the bus station, and on the right is the train station. This is Chapel Hill Street again. Next slide. Concept 2 raises the track, lowers the roadway. That gives us the additional vertical clearance underneath the bridge. And by replacing this bridge, that gives us the opportunity to increase the width from what it is today for wider sidewalks and the potential for bike lanes and buffers or dedicated bus lanes, depending on how we want to lay this out. Next slide, please. Concept D also raises the track and lowers the road in order to get more vertical clearance. This bridge is a little beefier than concept 2 because it is holding up 4 tracks instead of 2. But here again, by replacing that bridge, that allows us to put in wider sidewalks than what is out there today and bike lanes or bus lane. Next slide. Here's Gregson Street Bridge. This bridge is notorious for getting struck by trucks, even after NCRR recently jacked this bridge up. Next slide, please. Concept 2 raises the track even further from what NCRR did recently, replaces this bridge, which gives us more vertical clearance And here again, it also provides additional width for things like multi-use paths or super wide sidewalks. Next slide, please. Concept D also replaces that bridge, getting more vertical clearance and additional width for pedestrian for sidewalks. Next slide, please. From an aerial view, you can see Gregson Street in the foreground, Duke Street in the background, and there is a single track out there today. Next slide, please. Concept 2 adds a second track, replacing that rail bridge while also keeping Duke Street crossing open. Next slide, please. Concept D has a larger footprint, and that is because the tracks are spaced further apart to allow the development of those station tracks in the background there. Here again, we're replacing the rail bridge and keeping Duke Street open. Next slide, please. So at Blackwell Street, we wanted to be extra careful because of the old Bull building. It is a nationally registered historic site. And you can see in the existing condition, there is a single track that crosses here. Next slide, please. Concept 2 adds a second track across this intersection with minimal roadway work needed. We do anticipate that this crossing will remain open. Next slide. Concept D also adds a second track, but these tracks are spaced a little further apart. And that does require some amount of roadway work on Ramseur and Corcoran, but we do anticipate this crossing being able to remain open. Next slide. Here's an aerial view with Mangum in the foreground, Blackwell and Corcoran in the background there, and there is a single track out there today. Next slide. Concept 2 adds a second track with minimal roadway work needed. Next slide. Concept D also adds a second track, but you can see they're further apart. And again, it is to develop those station tracks that you see in the background there. And because they're further apart, that does require some amount of roadway work on Ramseur and Corcoran. And now Erin Convery with Go Triangle will talk about next steps and where we go from here.
Thank you, Mariah. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Erin Convery, Senior Transportation Planner with Go Triangle. And as Mariah mentioned, I will be talking through some of the next steps related to the Downtown Durham Design Concept Task. So as Mariah mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, one of the goals of this study task was to develop concepts with the least adverse impacts and most potential benefits for downtown Durham. If these concepts are moved into design, the project team will continue to evaluate their physical impacts as designs are refined, including potential property acquisitions, impacts to adjacent roadways, and reconstruction of railroad bridges. At the current level of review, it is anticipated that concept 2, which is the low-level boarding concept, would have minimal to low impacts on adjacent properties and roadways. However, in order to get the 4 tracks needed for the high-level platforms shown in concept D, moderate property impacts are likely. If the project moves forward for implementation, more extensive design work in the next project phase would determine specific property and roadway impacts. So with regards to scope, both concepts included more elements that were assumed in phase 1 of study, specifically replacing the existing railroad bridges to raise the railroad tracks that provide that additional clearance under the bridges that Mariah was discussing. It's estimated that with these additional pieces of scope, the low-level platform concept 2 would cost $15 million more, or approximately double the original estimate of $15 million for a typical station from the phase 1 of study. In addition to the raising of the rails, the high-level platform concept D would require additional tracks at the station area as well. So with this additional scope, it's estimated that concept D would cost approximately $35 million more than the phase 1 estimate. So moving into the next phase of project development, the project scope will continue to be evaluated and refined, and those cost estimates would be updated accordingly. So with regards to the downtown Durham design concepts, we'll also be conducting some engagement around these concepts in the coming weeks and months. During this upcoming engagement effort, we'll be engaging with a variety of communities and groups around these concepts through methods that could include focus groups, conversation series, attendance at community events, among other strategies. These initiatives will include education and feedback around those low-level and high-level boarding options that you saw earlier, accessibility, the physical footprints of options in downtown Durham, and those potential costs. Future additional corridor-wide engagement regarding topics like service, timetables, and operations will be planned for late spring and early summer as the study progresses, as well as in other focused areas requiring additional study, such as East Durham. So as we begin these engagement efforts, we'd like to take the opportunity at today's work session to understand from City Council how this engagement effort can be most useful to you. On this slide, you can see examples of groups and communities we are planning to reach out to in our engagement efforts. What specific input from the community would you like to hear regarding these downtown Durham design concepts? As we conclude our presentation on this task, we would like to open this topic up for discussion for your feedback in addition to the opportunity for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I will now open it up for discussion amongst our colleagues.
Mayor, I have a series of questions, but I'm going to ask one and then I'll come back. So I serve on the MPO board as well, and I watched the county commissioners meeting on Monday. This presentation is different. It has a bit more content in it. Is there a reason for that?
So this is a very similar, I think, presentation to what was given to the county commissioners. The Durham DCHC board had a different presentation, mainly because there's a lot of new members on that board. There's a couple new members, and also we hadn't been in front of that board in a year. We are planning to give a more detailed presentation to that board, hopefully in May. But this presentation that you see here today is tailored to Durham City and Durham County.
Thank you. I'll yield to my colleagues before coming back.
I think Mayor Pro Tem and Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you again, President Latuka and Ms. Ellington, for your presentation today. So I was really eagerly awaiting and anticipating this presentation because there's probably no issue that pulls more elements into it than transportation. I mean, from equity to our position as a regional economic power, and it's important that we keep Durham at the vanguard of this region's economic power, and I'm sure we will. But I do have a couple of questions. I guess I'll start with the slide that talked about property acquisition. And I want to use the light rail as kind of a template or cautionary tale, if you will, moving forward when it comes to commuter rail. I took an intense amount of heat when it came to property acquisition during the light rail saga, because we, very early in that process, when we needed to acquire land for the rail operation maintenance facility, eminent domain was instituted, not by this council, but by powers that be. And it was used for folk who were just regular folk. When we had the issue with needing more land from Duke, it was off the table. So moving forward with this particular project, and I know that you said it would exist within the already existing rail corridor, but we would need to expand if we're going to put another track in, and also there may be property acquisition, quote unquote. Do we foresee any need in this project moving forward to employ eminent domain? Do you anticipate that?
So I'm not sure I can say that for certain right now. I think what Aaron was referring to, that there is some impacts It's mostly going to be street impacts, I think, and sidewalk impacts. We are going to be mostly in the good thing about it is that you're building in an existing corridor, which is a pretty wide corridor throughout the region. It does get tight in Durham, where the streets are very close in, sidewalks are there too. You have a lot of bridges. So I'll let Aaron embellish that. But again, I think for the light rail, which was, didn't run in somebody else's right of way. You had to have your own maintenance facility. I know the property is still there and, needs to be taken care of. But I think for this particular project, it depends on, again, the platform. So if we do 2 tracks, probably very minimal. If we do the 4 tracks for the high platforms, you're going to have more impacts. But certainly there is going to be, of course, you need these pedestrian bridges too to get people back and forth across the tracks. But I think a lot of these impacts are going to have to be more defined when we get into the development phase, if we get into the development phase of the study or of the project. But I'll let Aaron and Mariah also, talk a little bit more detail. They're the planners and engineers. And I think they might be able to add to my answer.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And just to be clear, my question was prompted by, on the next steps, evaluating options under physical feasibility, the first bullet is potential property acquisitions. I just want to give you a sense as to what was animating my question.
And maybe Aaron or Mariah could add a little bit more to my answer on that.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, you want to try, or Mariah?
Sure. Thanks, Chuck. So I think, Chuck, at the end of your response there, you hit the nail on the head with that. At this point in time, these are very conceptual level design concepts. So when or if this project were to move forward into project development, there would need to be a much more detailed level of engineering done around these downtown corridors. Well, for the whole corridor, but specifically looking at all these constraints in downtown. So at this point, we just want to make it clear that there will be continued refinements to these physical feasibility options, cost estimates, impacts, et cetera, as this really moves into that more detailed level of design.
Fair enough. And I know this, we're preliminary. I also was, an antenna went up when we talked about impacts and limiting impact to bus service, which is absolutely vital to our residents and citizens in Durham. Most of our riders are Black and brown. Most of them are economically challenged. So when we say limit impact, I mean, if we're going to, the impact's going to be beneficial or augment service, and we want to maximize it, but it's very important, I think, moving forward that we keep in mind. And I'm glad to hear about the potential connecting of the bus station to the passenger loading areas, the station area, and I saw the little conceptual fly the bridge, but it's I know it's very important to us here in Durham that our bus service remains, not only functional, but that it's enhanced and robust. And aside from limiting, we would potentially want no impact on our bus services, given who they serve and given their vitality to to the way we do things here in Durham. So for whatever that's worth, we want to underscore limiting impact of bus service, particularly if it's going to cause more challenges for folk who already use our bus service to negotiate new lines because of commuter rail.
Yeah, I think because you'll have more trains passing through on a daily basis, so the potential that the gates are going to be down a lot more, and that could have an impact on the traffic, which could impact bus, have a ripple effect there. And actually, Sean Egan has brought that up to me and has emphasized this issue to us as we've been going forward here, and we are very cognizant of that issue. And we don't want to have a negative impact on the local bus service. We need local bus service to be very robust and functioning well. It's going to connect to the rail stations, and these projects are supposed to be complementary, not adverse, and that's our hope.
Absolutely.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry. Please.
I will note, in that whole slew of concepts that I talked about, there were some concepts that did have an impact to the access or the free movements of buses into the main bus station. And those did not rise to the top for that reason. So we've been paying close attention to that issue.
Well, I'm glad to hear that Director Egan's an able ambassador, and it doesn't surprise me that he would have sounded off for us in that respect. Absolutely. I had a couple more questions, but I'll yield now. I really appreciate this presentation. This is a hugely important matter. We know that, again, we want to keep Durham as a leader in our region for economic vitality, but we also want to make sure that those who need our buses here in Durham and that those who are most impacted from an equity standpoint are well represented in this process as well. And I know all of us working together can accomplish both of those things. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll yield back for now.
Councilwoman Freeman. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Appreciate the opportunity to ask just a couple of questions and to actually just make sure that the framework conversation doesn't get missed, and that I do want to see commuter rail move forward, and just acknowledging the past history with the light rail and the conversations. It's important to make sure that we keep in context the conversations, especially acknowledging that we're seeing a huge displacement of Black and brown families in our community, and issues around gun violence, issues around local organizations struggling, and the small businesses closing, and artists who haven't been at work. It's important to realize that these pieces will play into your opportunities conversation. And so when I brought up the issue around affordability, I do want to make sure that we are keeping that at the center of this engagement conversation. And I want to make sure that there's, also I made a note, an analysis around how that lack of transparency in the previous project is going to play into this project. Yeah. And so the needs that come across in our conversations are overwhelmingly around bus. And I try to be supportive in having those conversations in our community to make sure that people understand that the rail is to come. And I just want to continue to push that concept and conversation forward. I do know that I think the best way to say it is that, the way that Mayor Pro Tem said, with the region of economic, being an economic powerhouse. In order to continue to be that, we have to do this well. And I do want to say that if we don't have the conversation about how light rail failed and the money that was missing, we will not move forward. And I want to be really clear, like, you cannot hide and pretend like it didn't happen. It happened, and we have to face it. That's the first thing. And then I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but I do want to say that I did have a chance to listen in on the MPO meeting, and there was a lot of conversation that's not included in this presentation. So I want to hold and just say that I would love to have the conversation and I guess in a more formal way, specific to how the light rail is moving forward, because it feels a lot like the previous, the commuter rail conversation feels a lot like the light rail conversation, and you're coming forward with concepts and folks have not even been engaged in the conversation. And so it comes across like, same thing with DOT. What color do you want the road striped? It's already been planned, it's already been organized, and we're moving forward. It has to be a consistent when we, because if you start to talk in absolutes, you will lose folks and we will be at war. That's all, thank you.
So I'll just quickly mention that we are working on a new analysis for the Durham Orange Light Rail project expenditures. We put a couple of some information out there about a year ago, and also I think in November, and the information has not been satisfactory. We are going to work to improve that information. It is very, very detailed. We're going to present it to our Go Triangle board in the March meeting on the 23rd and get their input on the information and make sure that it's adequate. And when they're happy with it, we're going to bring that information to you in the community to have sessions and talk about how the money was spent. and why it was spent and what's happening with the property. So we're looking forward to that conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have with Durham and Orange County, who also had 20% of their fund of the project cost on them. I appreciate that and understand that that light rail project is continuing to have a cast a shadow on future projects.
Councilwoman Caballero.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good to see you again. I was at the MPO meeting and slightly different presentation, but I had a couple questions. So I've seen the TJ-COG study around the 37% affordable housing within the corridor area, but is that within the station area?
So I'll let Aaron address that question. If you can, Aaron.
I will need to pull that report up and double check that for you, Councilwoman Caballero, but we can get back on that.
So my recollection is that it's for within 1 mile of the corridor, not directly adjacent to the stations, but we anticipate that there will be service to get people to stations, even if they're not near the station, that's an important aspect of the project to make sure people can get to the stations.
Thank you. And when you get that information, can you just make sure to send it to all council members? And then,
yes.
Thank you. And then my other question is when can we anticipate, and maybe I missed it, but more information on the demographics of expected riders?
So yeah, that's part of the study as we are working to complete it. They're running the models right now on the ridership. That information is not complete yet, but we want to be back in front of you hopefully in the next 2 months with a lot more information.
Thank you. That's all.
Councilwoman Johnson, followed by Councilman Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is probably a question for Director Egan. I'm not clear, given the kind of complexity of the partnerships in this project, I'm not clear at what point we as a council have decisions to make, or like where any decision-making authority on our part would come in to the development of this project. Could you give us a little bit of a sense, more of a sense of like when would we have to vote on something, for example, or like when do we as a council actually weigh in a way that impacts the progress of the project?
Certainly. This is Sean Egan again, Director of Transportation. So it's brought up actually in the next presentation that Ellen Beckman will be giving that there will be a request for letters of support and commitment for the project. The timeline in Ellen's presentation shows that they're looking to collect those letters in August of this year. So that would be when a formal action would be, I think, requested of the City Council on this. And even though because the city doesn't participate in the project management team for this, and the city does not have a vote on the Durham County Transit Plan. So that would be the only formal action that the city would be that letter of support that's scheduled for that August timeframe.
Okay, thank you. And without that letter of support, is that required for the project to advance?
Chuck, do you want to speak to that process?
I will tell you that probably the commissioners would want to know where the council stands. And I will also say that as we apply for federal funding, they're going to want to know where Durham stands. It would not be easy for us to seek federal funding unless the city was satisfied with how the project's going.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, I want to go on the record and say to my colleagues that, the city of Durham provides a little less than 80% of the transportation throughout the Durham County. I think it'll behoove us to be an actual voting member in that. So that's something we're going to probably take up, get consensus, and take up with the MPO in Durham County. Is that right, Councilman Caballero?
Yeah, and if I may, I wanted to follow up. There is a governance study happening at the MPO level, And what was clearly stated by council members and others, including staff, was that we really need to have a real partnership and actual true voice. And we're watching the conclusion of that governance study, and Councilmember Williams, as the liaisons to the MPO and voting members, will continue to advocate the city's position on that.
I'll go on. Mr. Latuka. So because in the presentations we're getting, the cost share, the breakdown of finances, and what money, anything, it's just not really in the presentations. And it's really hard for us to receive, it's really hard for us to be comfortable with the presentation or the overall project when we're fiscally responsible for the taxpayers' dollars. So question one is, how much have we spent on this study for commuter rail to date?
So this study was approved for $9 million. Go ahead.
Is there any consistency regarding study between the light rail and commuter rail expenditures?
I don't know. I wasn't here when the light rail studies were being advanced. However, I will tell you that a lot of lessons were learned from light rail, and this study has incorporated a lot of those lessons. So lessons like, are we doing a good job projecting what the construction challenges are and design challenges? I will tell you that more was invested on this study on that issue than initially planned. So we went very heavy on examining construction challenges so we get a better cost estimate for everybody. We don't talk about the money right now because we don't have a project cost for you yet. So I would like to say, yeah, we have a placeholder number, but that might not be the number. It'd be close, I think, I hope, because we don't want to, start talking about what the splits might be between the counties or what the cost sharing is, because we don't know what the number is yet. We will soon. But right now, my understanding, and I think Ellen Beckman is going to talk a little bit about that, where the transit plan is anticipating how the cost would be shared on an 80-20 basis. And I think she'll expand on that as a goal for the transit plan. But again, we need to understand better what the final number is going to be before we can finish the conversation or start, have that conversation in detail about how we're going to pay for the project. So I hope that satisfies your answer, your question on that.
Yeah, I appreciate the response, and I know that you're new, so I'm more so directing my line of questioning to the agency. And I just have a lot of folks that are asking me questions that I can't really answer. So I'm going to put this out there. There was with management and design expenses, we spent $922,132. In general and administrative expenses, we spent $16,139,172. And real estate expenses, a little over $6 million. Other expenses, a little over, almost $4 million. So in total, about $157 million. And the only thing that we can really refer to is lessons learned. And those lessons aren't really transparent. And we are spending $9 million, which is a lot of money to real, everyday folks. So I just want us to, as we're moving forward, and the numbers I just read are from the light rail study. And because I'm getting so many questions about what happened to light rail, and now we're talking about commuter rail, and it's not really lined up with the actual surveying that we did regarding our ridership. We have to make this make sense to our constituents. So as we're moving forward, I just want to make sure that we're putting all of the relevant information out there for us. I really, really, really am looking forward to commuter rail coming to the area, but I want us to be wholesome in this information that we're sharing.
Yes, and you are correct in all those numbers you stated. That is information that we are working to break down further and provide more detail on for folks to our board, and then to when they're happy, to folks in the community. Other things I will say that that this current study is taking on. We're going to have a good financial analysis. We're going to have a good, I think, result in relation to liability and insurance issues with the Class 1 railroad and NCRR. That was an issue that was unresolved at the time of the light rail termination. We have resolved those issues in advance. So I think a lot of issues that were not resolved in light rail as the project moves into development, we hope to have a lot of those issues resolved before we move into development on this project, if we are given the opportunity.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to being a team player. I just want to make sure we get this all out there.
Yes, and I appreciate your voice to the community's concerns, and we are going to work very hard to answer those concerns.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to echo Councilmember Williams and that conversation, and just acknowledging that these are the hard, like, recognizing that I'm sorry, I don't want to mess up your last name.
Latuka.
Mr. Tupin is new. It's not on you, it's on all of us. And as elected officials, we do want to make sure that we're responsible about how we're spending these dollars. And I can't state enough that the light rail project was not just a lesson learned for you, it was a lesson learned for all of us. And based on that, I want to be really clear that the dollars will be what we track, and the accountability is on all of us, so that the more that you can share and the more information that we have available, the better things will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to give a context. I had already explained, I've had several, I sit on the Go Triangle board at this point in time. I've been oriented, had an orientation on just this week. I've had several conversations, including on yesterday with Commissioner Hutchinson, and I've been really clear. But I want to give sort of a context, because I think it's important that we kind of remember why we're here in terms of historical context, and why transportation for African Americans is a particularly thorny issue. And it goes back to the broken promises of 40 acres and a mule, and I can probably even predate it back to our travel here by boat. Our ancestors traveled here by boat to a new land. And so throughout our history, our plight has been that the slaves and its descendants to this day have never, ever realized the promises of stability in housing and transportation. And we continue to see that evolve even now as we watch a number of brown and black people being displaced in the housing arena, and now with transportation. And what has generally happened is that when those shifts occur over the historical context, black people have usually been the labor force, and others have benefited thereof. And so when you keep it in that historical context, that we just recently got off the back of the bus in the last 50 years. You know, we were literally riding, paying the same fees, but we were relegated to being a second-class citizen. And that's in my history. So when you think about that context and the fight to even ride or sit on the bus, people died on buses. Buses, if you go to the Civil Rights Museum, you will see buses that were burned out, where they were firebombed because black folk were trying to get equal rights to public transportation. So once again, when I entered into this context to seek this position, that became a resounding theme. What happened to the $167 million in light rail. And at that time, I did not even realize there's a difference between the light rail and the commuter rail. So as I've talked to some of the folk over at Go Triangle, I've explained to them, we didn't have a voice. Well, there have been a history of railroads and bus transit designs and subways. Black folk were not a part of those conversations as they were being developed across the country. But now that we have a voice, that voice is gonna be heard. And so that's what you're gonna hear, especially if it seems like, once again, the transportation systems are being designed either complicitly or willfully so that it results in continued inequity. That means the buses that are now being used by our poor folk and our Black and brown folk primarily of a lower socioeconomic status, will they once again be sacrificed so that the commuter rail can be used for people of more means, and that most often particular means white folks. So that's the historical context by which I have listened to the conversations. And so I saw the sheet that Go Triangle had sent out because I was really interested, because I was hearing that people had answered the question of what had happened to the money, and then I saw the actual document, and it was very general. For Black folk, that is a sign of you are not being transparent and you are hiding something. So I explained to them that we are in kindergarten when it comes to talking about these conversations about transportation. As I sat down with one of my Go Triangle colleagues, we spent about 3 or 4 hours in my chambers, and he was just explaining to me North Carolina Railroad and how they own and operate this system, and how the rails are designed and the regions, and and that was my first glance at that system. So I explained to them, you're gonna have to go back to kindergarten and you're gonna have to catch us up. And the one thing you cannot speak in is generalities, especially when it comes to dollars. So I've asked them, we need a report that says who, what, and when. Meaning who got the money, what did they spend it on, and when did we get a return? Whatever the return is, that's got to be the detailed report. Otherwise, it is very difficult and impossible for us to go forward and satisfy our neighbors who are exclaiming that with some truth that the bus lines are not robust as they should be. I am going out and ride Route 9. I've heard a lot of talk about Bragtown Route 9. I already have it on our calendar. Chair Commissioner and I and Amber will be taking a ride down Route 9 in the next couple of weeks to see exactly what's happening on that rail, on that road, on that particular route. And there's some other ones that I plan to ride. I haven't ridden the buses in a long time. I don't live near a bus line, but I did take it as a child and a young teenager, and so I'm anxious to get back out there and see it again. Nevertheless, I will end my comments by saying this. I am for commuter rail. I was one of those travelers who travel up and down the highways to Wake County and neighboring counties holding court, trying very serious matters, and it would have been a great time to sit on a commuter rail and not have the press of, not have had the press of 70 or 147. As a judge was traveling, the attorneys were traveling, the paralegals were traveling, and some of the parties involved were traveling as well. I can also envision a time, and I like to keep that in my mind, where some of our kids who never left Durham could get on a bus, stand at a safe bus stop, and take that bus to a train station and take that train to the state fair. You know, that right there just kind of blows my mind that we may have the opportunity. But it's gotta be just that. It's gotta be an interconnected system where people who have been marginalized for so long, and we are oppressed people. That can never be forgotten. Just because you have a mayor who's black, you have a number of city council folk who black, the city manager, it seems like we're blacker than black. At the end of the day, we are still very new in all of these positions, and we can only represent and do what we can do as a people, as individual peoples. But there are systemic things, which is why I'm going to stand it. There are systemic things that have to be shifted in order for equality to occur at a realistic level. And transportation is a particularly thorny issue that we have got to resolve along with our housing issues if we are going to be, as my pastor says, the yet to be United States of America. You got to deal with the 40 acres and a mule and the fact that that promise has been broken and continues to be broken, and you got to fix it. And it starts right here in Durham, North Carolina. This is a primary example of where good things can occur with this commuter rail and having a great bus system that's interconnected for every child. Leave nobody behind. So those are my comments. And now we will move to our next presentation, Durham County Transit Plan update. Mr. Egan, is that going to be you as well, sir?
So I'll just introduce the speakers. We are joined today by Ellen Beckman, Transportation Manager for Durham County, as well as Aaron Kane, who's the Transportation Planning Manager for the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough Metropolitan Planning Organization. And with that, I'll hand it off to Ellen and Aaron. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Glad these two items could be on the same agenda. As mentioned, Ellen Beckman, Durham County Transportation Manager. I am managing the development of the Durham Transit Plan in coordination with Aaron Kane, as well as a large group of stakeholders, including staff from Go Triangle, City of Durham, TJ Cog, as well as consultant staff. Let me share my screen for the presentation. All right, hopefully that's good. Looks good. So this is the first reimagining of the Durham Transit Plan since the light rail project was canceled. We've come and updated the City Council several times along the way. Last time was in October on the results of our Phase 2 engagement. This presentation is focused on the financial metrics and where we're at in the development of our recommended plan. So this is where we're at. We're at number 2. We are looking at those outreach results that we received and were presented last summer and fall. But we're also looking more at technical work and financial analysis. And that's all feeding into what we're going to end up putting into our recommended transit plan. The goal is to have that complete and ready for release for public comment around May, do engagement over the summer, and then bring forward a plan to the 3 boards that are required to adopt the plan per state law. And that's the Durham County Commissioners, the DCHC MPO Board, and the Go Triangle Board. Of course, the City Council is represented on both the DCHC MPO Board and the Go Triangle Board. The 4 financial topics that I'm going to talk about today are listed here. First thing, we looked at the financial model. That is what is used to kind of predict the revenues and how they'll change and grow, the cost and how we can afford different projects. And I'll just say that this model is developed by Go Triangle as the tax district administrator. This review was very cooperative between Durham County and the Go Triangle staff. And then secondly, we looked at the bus operating costs. As mentioned, right, Go Durham, Go Triangle, we're both looking for bus drivers. This is common to all areas of the country right now. There's a bus driver shortage. Both of them are, heavily recruiting, trying to attract more bus operators. Part of that involves increases in pay. So that is affecting our bus operating costs. In addition, fuel costs right now, everyone's very aware that fuel costs are going up. Supply costs, a lot of different costs are going up. And so we needed to look at that more closely and see how it had affected our 20-year plan. Thirdly, we looked at the administrative costs associated with the plan. So this is mostly staff or consulting costs, other types of contracting costs like that are all in support of developing the plan, monitoring the plan, providing oversight to the plan, and implementing projects. So as we do more things, there's going to be a need for more staff, and local staff is absolutely essential for us all to be successful. And then lastly, we wanted to look closely at the commuter rail project and the cost share. So some of the things you just were talking about. There is a assumption that there will be a cost share agreement between Durham and Wake County, maybe Johnston County, on the cost share associated with that project. It is a responsibility of the Durham County Commissioners in Durham to approve that cost share. So we wanted, and it's a big project, clearly, right? It has a big implication for what we can afford to put in our plan. So we looked at what the implications for changing that cost share would be. So for a little bit of background on all this financial modeling and metrics, we have our adopted plan. Of course, 20-year plan, like I said, has to be adopted by those 3 boards. But we also have this interlocal implementation agreement that is also adopted by those 3 boards. The interlocal implementation agreement provides some of the specifics for how we implement projects, approve annual budgets, approve projects to move forward. So a lot of the stuff you're talking about in relation to the light rail project. Our current interlocal implementation agreement was written in 2013, and it was written in coordination with Orange County and was very much written with the context of the light rail project and that being a joint priority of the 2 counties. It is pretty short though. We didn't have a lot of specifics on a lot of our processes. And there isn't a specified role for the county or the MPO in financial management of the plan in that current interlocal implementation agreement. We also don't have any sort of adopted official policy for financial management. The Go Triangle is the tax district administrator. This is in state statute, and that they will continue to be the tax district administrator. The county commissioners, the MPO board, the Go Triangle board approve the transit plan roughly every 4 years. And within that transit plan is the financial plan. So that's how we're going to pay for it. So that's really the role that the county and the MPO currently have on financial management. The staff working group, which is a staff working group, develops the annual work program. That's the annual budget. But and they make a recommendation, but only the Go Triangle board approves that annual budget. And I'll say, in terms of financial management, like we have this long range projection for our transit plan, but we also are looking at this year by year with the development of that annual budget. So there's both a long-term and short-term component to it. We are looking at revising this interlocal implementation agreement. And for that effort, we are coordinating with Orange County on a transit plan governance study. This is underway. Many of you, I think, participated in some interviews for that in the fall. And we had an elected official workshop also in November. And we just had a staff workshop last week. So it's proceeding. We are hoping to bring forward an update on this perhaps next month to our boards. And this is all related. This is, this plan will produce this new interlocal implementation agreement, and it will also look at the development of new policies that we need to guide how we do things, how we work together. And it's all in the spirit of increasing community trust. Two of our key core principles of the transit plan are equity and community trust. And so I know this is like the in the weeds, how the sausage is made bureaucracy stuff, but it's really essential in addressing some of the concerns mentioned and making sure that we're all going to do things better. You know, I think we all are disappointed what happened with the light rail project, and we are all committed to doing things better. And this I think will help us achieve that. The county, you know, I work for the county, of course, so the county certainly wants a stronger role in financial management of the plan. The county commissioners authorized the referenda that approved the sales tax. So they, and all the residents of Durham County pay the sales tax. So the county really is responsible for that taxpayer money and should have a stronger role in financial management of the plan. And we'll also be developing financial policy that's consistent with the new plan and some of the elements that I'm going to talk about today. So back to those 4 items. The first item is the financial model assumptions. And this slide goes through those assumptions. If there's a change, it's in that blue color. So first, we looked at the sales tax revenue growth. This is the primary funding source. And what we are recommending is that we will continue to use the Moody's baseline forecast, which averages about a 4.5% annual growth rate. This forecast was developed during the light rail project. It hasn't been updated, but it is our best information that we have today. So we're going to continue to use that. And just for context, the Wake County uses a flat 4% growth rate. They do not have this sort of forecast developed. Secondly is the debt service coverage ratio. We are going to be sticking with a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio, and this is the lowest coverage to receive an A or higher rating. This is the same as Wake County. So with coordinating on the commuter rail project, it's important that we be consistent. Thirdly, we looked at the reserves. We are recommending no change to our operating reserve. That's sticking with 3 months of operating. On the capital reserve, we were recommending a change to increase that to 5% of the 10-year CIP. Again, this is consistent with Wake County. So a lot of these changes are moving us closer and more consistent with Wake County. And then lastly, we're recommending a revenue reserve. So this is new. This is not in our current model. We're recommending a revenue reserve of about $10 million. And this really is to mitigate for the potential that our sales tax revenue isn't as high as what we're anticipating, and to mitigate for the concern that there may be a recession. So collectively, in total, these 3 changes result in $26 million less dollars available from when, as compared to when we went out for public comment on our options last summer. So it's a relatively modest change for the roughly $1 billion over the 20 years, but it helps strengthen our financial model and helps make sure that we can deliver the projects that we put in our plan. The other important side of this is the cost. We are not recommending any change in the capital project growth. We're using 4% annually, but we are having to incorporate changes to our operating projects. You know, as mentioned with the bus driver shortage, there's pretty significant forecasted increases in cost. From the transit operators, we received these requests. Go Triangle requested a 7.4% increase from our budgeted FY22 to FY23, and Go Durham asked for a 20.5% increase. We had previously been assuming an average 2.5% increase. So this is a very significant difference from what we had been modeling. The effect of that change is that just to continue paying for our existing committed projects, it's about a $23 million impact. And then for our future projects, it's about a $50 million impact, but it really depends on what is in our plan, what those future projects are. These charts show what that looks like. The pink line is what we had been budgeting. The blue line is the actual cost, and the green line is what the request is. So I will say that this was an area where it was a little difficult to find information and we didn't have good documentation of our policies. So this is the type of thing that we would benefit by putting into a financial policy and making sure that we all have a common understanding of what is included. And the staff working group is currently considering that. The intention here is that this only includes the cost to directly provide the service and that there should not be any overhead or fixed costs. There should not be any supplanting of local effort or local funding sources for transit. New costs shouldn't be moved to the transit plan. We're really just trying to continue to pay for what we've always paid for, but accommodate, that very real increases that we have for, bus operating costs, fuel, et cetera. Okay, so then thirdly, we looked at the administrative costs. This chart shows what's in our current FY22 work program. The tax district administration is provided by Go Triangle. So you can see they receive funding for that. Transit plan administration is shared between Go Triangle, the DCH, CMPO, and Durham County. So the three primary partners who have to approve the plan receive funding for that. And then thirdly, we have project implementation costs. So Go Triangle currently receives funding for that. There are some requests on the table. We got 3 positions requested by the city of Durham, 0.25 by Go Triangle. Those are under consideration by the staff working group. And again, the staff working group makes a recommendation for what gets included in our annual work program. And that typically is brought to the county commissioners and the city council for comment, but the Go Triangle board is the board that approves it. For the purposes of our transit plan, we had to make some assumptions of what this would be. So what we had put in our model is that we would continue the existing administration costs and have up to 4.5 additional positions. So that's what's in our modeling. I will say that there was some discussion of this at the Board of Commissioners and at the MPO board, and there were some questions and concerns about the city's request. One suggestion that's been made that I think is really growing on me, and I think we need to talk about it, is that we need to maybe have an interlocal agreement between the city and county that clarifies some of the roles and responsibilities between the city and county on transportation. We have a long history of collaboration. I think I just looked this up, 87% of the residents of Durham County live in the city of Durham. Those of you who've been around a while know that I worked for the city of Durham for 15 years. So I think we have a lot of, Durham City and Durham County have a long history of collaboration. And this is an area where we could have an agreement that could strengthen that and provide more partnership and better services to our residents. Okay, lastly, the commuter rail project. So for the purposes of our plan, we have to make some assumptions of what that cost will be. We're trying to develop our plan and bring something forward to you in May, and we needed to make an assumption. So the current placeholder cost is $1.95 billion for capital and about $41 million for the annual operating cost. That's subject to change, of course, based on the Go Triangle study. Some of the things in that presentation just now would affect this dollar amount. Our current adopted plans for Durham and Wake County assume that the project will be funded 50% federal, and then 50% non-federal. The current Durham transit plan assumes that 20% of that non-federal share is paid by Durham. The current Wake transit plan assumes that Wake County will pay 67% of that 50% non-federal. So that doesn't add up to 100. That leaves 13% of the non-federal share kind of undetermined. In this pie chart, it shows up as 7% because it's showing the total. So we looked at what it would mean if Durham's cost share would increase. So we put that in the model And increasing Durham's cost share from 20 to 33% would result in an increase in our cost from about $387 million to $649 million. And we'd have to reduce the new services and projects in the transit plan by about half. So Durham has a lot less money than Wake County. The ratio of the dollars between Durham and Wake are more along the lines of like 25-75. So there's, an increase here really greatly affects what we could put in our plan. The engagement results that we got in our phase 2 engagement, if you remember, some of the key points that residents told us were that increasing bus service was a high priority, particularly from our bus riders and people of color. The transit plan had support. It rated, towards the top among a number of the questions that we asked. However, it wasn't the highest priority, and everyone said that we needed that balanced transportation plan that addressed as many of the needs of our residents as possible. And that there wasn't really support for increasing that cost share. So with that feedback and doing this analysis on the financing side, the Durham Transit team is recommending that we remain at the 20% of the non-federal share, or the $388 million. And that's what we are developing our recommended plan around. Wake County and Go Triangle did propose a few options for different sorts of splits that changed how we would pay for this over time, either capital operating or included some sort of Wake paying more upfront and Durham paying more later. We looked at that, but it all would kind of tie up our money for a longer period of time and leave us less flexible to deal with changes as our community grows, and that new needs are going to be addressed and going to emerge in the future, and we're going to need to make sure that we can address those needs. So we are recommending sticking with the simple cost share, and that applies to both capital and operating. All right, so that's the financial update for the transit plan. The transit team and our consultants are using this information to develop our recommended plan. Hope to bring that forward in May, engagement over the summer, approval in the fall. The Go Triangle is now at a state in the Commuter Rail project where they have a lot of information to share with the public. And we know that we'll get a lot of questions about the Commuter Rail project. So we're trying to coordinate our engagement period with Go Triangle. But in the meantime, we do have the development of our annual budget or work program underway. One of the other things we heard from the public was that everyone wanted us to implement improvements. I think a lot of people want to see that this money is being used to benefit them more quickly. So we are looking at ways that we can implement some projects next year, and that the approval of that would occur this spring. So these things are kind of occurring at the same time. So it might be a little bit confusing, but we'll try our best to communicate this well. There may be some amendments to the transit plan while we're still working on the development of our recommended new transit plan. So this is roughly what the schedule looks like for that. Hopefully that helps you visualize these overlapping processes. I will say that on the commuter rail study, as Sean mentioned, and based on the question, there is this assumption that there will be resolutions of support or letters of support, and there will be a cost share agreement. I put this in August. It could change. I do want to acknowledge that the commuter rail study, I think, has the schedule is still somewhat subject to the finalization of some of their materials and the modeling by the railroads. So that might not be August, but hopefully later this year. All right, so that's my presentation, and I'll take questions.
Thank you so much. We'll open it up to our colleagues. Any questions?
I do. I want to preface this with this is a learning process as well. And as I'm learning, so are many of the members in our community. So the first question is, just understanding the structure with the transportation. So Durham, we have a transportation department, but we do not control the funding of our transportation. How does that work?
So yes, what I was talking about was specific to the county transit plan and the revenues that are included in the county transit plan. And this is primarily the sales tax. And there's a state statute that authorized our ability to enact the sales tax, and it specifies the roles of who has to approve that plan, who can enact that tax. And it is the county commissioners, the DCHCMPO board, and the Go Triangle board. This is just a small piece of the funding that funds the City of Durham's transportation department. There's a lot of other revenues that certainly are very much controlled by the city.
Okay, so it's safe to say that we are not an equal partner or decision-making body regarding transportation, although 80%, a little less than 80% of the transportation happens in the city limits.
For this tax.
For the tax.
Specifically.
Okay, all right. Just trying to figure all of that out. And I think we have time to work with our neighbors, our county holders, just to understand how we can better hash this out. Another clarifying question. So regarding the cost share for commuter rail, in the numbers that I read earlier, I do want to say for the public that I'm not sure, but I don't think a shovel hit the ground after that 157 million. So that's why I'm on this like a hawk. But just fully understanding here, if we were to go forward with all things as is, and this is around the commuter rail cost share, we would pretty much take out about 50% of all of the planned projects for our bus transit. Is that sure? Is that correct?
So we have, for the money, there's some existing projects that we're going to continue to pay for, that things that we've already committed to and that maybe are already in place, things like some increased services on various routes. So that's one piece. There are some other projects that are underway that we're committed to funding, things like the city's Better Bus projects, Village Transit Center, transit emphasis corridors, those are included in that. So those are continuing. What we looked at was that if the cost share increased from 20 to 33%, how that would affect the new projects that we're going to be identifying through this transit plan. And it would result in a cut to those projects of about 50%. If that makes sense. So it's a big piece, right? This is a big project, costs a lot of money, and the change in the percentage has an effect on what else we can put in the plan.
Got you. And Raleigh, the other question I had was, so I'm looking at the graph here, and 50% is federal. The other 50% is Durham and Wake, and then we have to figure out that 7% undetermined. The rail will go through Orange County and Johnson County and Chatham as well?
No,
No?
was shown in the Go Triangle presentation. The current study is studying from roughly the Johnston-Wake County line to the station in West Durham.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Near Duke. So that's the extent of the project right now.
I'll look forward to the calls from my friends in Raleigh and Wake County. But, we want to make sure we have Durham's residents in our best interest. Thank you. I'll yield back.
Anyone else? Yes. Thank you so much. Oh, Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to appreciate the presentation. It's good to get regular updates about this work. And thank you, Ellen. We miss you in our over on this side of the local government divide, but we're glad we still get to see you. And I wanted to thank Council Members Caballero and Williams for serving on these transportation boards. And it's just this very complicated maze of relationships and authorities, and I honestly have a hard time keeping track of them all and wrapping my head around them. So I appreciate y'all digging in there and keeping everything straight for us, and letting us know when we, when and how we need to be engaged. And I look forward to more conversation about the city being more of a partner in making these decisions. It is really hard to figure out what our role is in different spaces, whether we are actually being asked to vote and make a decision, whether we're just making, having input, whether we're just being informed. I never really know. So look forward to y'all continuing the conversation about us being more, having more of a voice in those conversations, because we do, the vast majority of folks in the county are in the city. All of our bus networks are, of course, really important to city residents, and it's important for us to be able to represent their interests and their needs in this process. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Again, thank you for the presentation. I saw it at the MPO, and I don't know where we're going to come up with this, this 7%, and I appreciate that staff has held the line thus far, or I should say the county, on the county side. And I do want to reiterate that we were going to have to find a way to do both. I've been pretty loud about that at the MPO. We need both really excellent bus, because that gets a lot of our local folks around, and we also need really important regional transportation. I don't have any financial solutions for you all, but I just want to say that in this setting that we are a region. We are Durham, but we also know that this is a region that is going to grow very quickly. And so we're going to have to work with our partners and MPOs and Campo and where else to solve this question around whether it's a commuter rail or light rail or whatever. Doesn't matter. It's been a conversation that has cycled through, I want to say, since the 70s. And so I'm 44. It's basically been going on my whole life. We have to come up with a solution of some sort to move folks. We cannot just keep widening I-40 and hoping that we're going to solve our transit issues. We also know that most, if not many, if not most, of our jobs are going to be in Wake County and to the east. And so if we do want to actually talk about improving the material lives, the quality of lives of our Durham residents, a lot of those jobs are going to be jobs that they're going to have to commute to up to an hour away. And it's going to be a lot better for them to be able to sit on a train and not sit in traffic to get to those jobs. So while we're in a predicament, I do want to at least state my very vocal support of the commuter rail. I understand why we're in the, this is not going to be an easy decision, but we're going to have to find a solution to it.
I was actually sending a message to Councilmember Caballero to mention something we talked about, and I echo actually the same thing. We got to figure out how we're going to do this. It is needed, but we're going to definitely scrutinize to make sure we're transparent. Also, Councilmember Caballero and I, in a very informal way right now, are planning to hopefully do a town hall or a listening something. We want to be able to engage the community as much as possible to get this information out as much as possible. So just be on the lookout for that. That's not formal yet.
Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Williams and Councilmember Caballero for your leadership in this conversation. And I do want to echo Councilmember Johnson's appreciation for Ellen Beckman, and I just want to say she's my hero. I will tell her that often. I just want to just share just a little bit too of the background, just acknowledging that I got involved with the city very actively with the DOT project and quickly had to unravel the transportation conversation in a real way. And I understand where we are and how we got here. The problem has been, it's been consistent, as our mayor mentioned, for a lot of folks of color for multiple generations, and it's really clear that if we don't do it differently, we're going to get the same results. And so I do appreciate that the conversation, this robust discussion has been very clear that we're trying to do it differently. It's been very clear that everyone understands what's at stake and how it's had an impact. And I want to offer that when I first got involved with the Ed Neighborhood Council, I developed a whole like Transportation 101 presentation, and I would definitely be willing to share with our new colleagues, Mayor O'Neill and Williams as well, and Councilmember Williams, just because it is such a tangled web. The funds that come in from the federal government, often, the funds from the federal government, the funds from the state, and the way we work with the county are all been parsed and reparsed, and even the way that our MPO board and our COG and there's another manager, Indigo Triangle Board, like all of those different ways that all of these pieces come together is very murky. And I feel like that folks have been working in a very like, let's just get it done way, as opposed to trying to figure out what's efficient. And so I appreciate the opportunity to pull back and figure this out right now. And so I look forward to the town hall, and any way that I can be supportive, please let me know. I will also add that as a National League of Cities representative on the Federal Transportation and Infrastructure Advocacy Group, we do get the chance to sit in front of the chair, vice chair, and staffers for the federal government, and I really hope that we get a chance to have this conversation there. So thank you.
Just some final remarks from me. There are a couple of things that have been going on in terms of the city trying to get funding and take advantage of some grant opportunities. Mayor Pro Tem Middleton has graciously agreed to kind of lead this charge in terms of how we can begin to be innovative in that space to get some of these monies that are out there. There are plenty of federal dollars out there. I learned a lot about them when I went to the mayor's conference in Washington, D.C., and we are positioning ourselves to take advantage of that. Got back here to Durham and figured out Durham City staffers were already on it. They are already in that application mode. And so there's a group that has been put together that will be furthering that effort, and Mayor Pro Tem Middleton will be kind of taking the position as from the council. Also, so we're going to try to get some dollars. We're going to try to help in that effort to get some dollars to help fill this gap. I do thank the presentations for today. I also want to particularly note Chairwoman, our Chair of the County Commissioners, who's been really steadfast in this arena, and her contributions in helping to make sure that I've been caught up and that Durham is really informed. When I talked with the Commissioner Hutchison on yesterday, I did ask him about conversations with the communities, and I see we had that on the presentation today. So I do think there's an opportunity for the Councilwoman Caballero and Councilman Williams for us to kind of do something innovative in that space. If you know of agencies, and I encourage Durham citizens to reach out to either of the three, Mayor Pro Tem or either Councilman Williams or Councilwoman Caballero, and because I'm kind of stretched everywhere, so I don't want to take on too much and not do it well. But if you will reach out to one of those three, I did tell Commissioner Hutchison that we would provide some additional names of community groups that they may need to talk to. Particularly, I'm thinking about the Walltown group. I'm also thinking about Bragtown, and those kind of folks should be added. I also asked them to provide a component relating back to the fact that a lot of us don't know this area well, and that the ones who have been in this space are still struggling too with how all of this fits together. So it will be a unique opportunity to not only to help to educate our citizenry, but also for us to get further knowledge. So if they could provide some educational components as to how all of these parts work together and just some basic understanding of it, so that we can help ourselves to be more educated and help our citizens to learn it as we learn it. As we all know, knowledge is power. So let's be powerful and get us ready. All righty. That was a great presentation. Great, robust conversations. Yay. Let us move on now to our boards and commissions and task force nominations. I believe we will turn it over to our clerk first, and then we'll follow up with our Mayor Pro Tem on his meetings with Councilwoman Johnson and their determination as to timelines for filling Councilman Reese's positions. Madam Clerk.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I do have a very brief report this afternoon. The Durham City County Appearance Commission reappointment is for Thomas J. Flynn. The Durham City County Appearance Commission, the first open appointment is for Leah F. Selvey. She's been nominated. And then the second appointment there is being re-advertised. And that's the end of my report.
Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I will be deliberate and with speed in doing this next section, under other matters. So it's no secret that 7 have become 6 on the occasion of Councilmember Reese's resignation. And I want to, on the record, clarify and correct something I said publicly at our last meeting, and that is that when Councilmember Reese tendered his letter of resignation, we accepted it that a 60-day clock had been triggered. According to our charter, that's actually correct. However, I want to be clear that we are not under compulsion to fill it within a strict 60 days. By state statute, we can do it. We have to act with dispatch and act deliberately, but we are not under a 60-day clock. With that said, that's not to say that we won't have it done within 60 days, but I just know that we're not going to get dinged or fined, or they're not going to come haul us off if we don't get it done. They may haul us off for other reasons for the state, but not because of that within 60 days. With that said, I want to thank Councilmember Johnson and Councilor Donald Toole from the City Attorney's Office, and Madam Clerk, you as well, that I met with. We had a meeting this week to discuss the proposed timetable, and I want to present that timetable to you, colleagues, today and get permission to go forward with it. So as of tomorrow, hold on a second. Something just happened to my... Okay, we want to authorize the clerk tomorrow to notice to the public that the position is open, inviting them to apply and submit responses to a questionnaire, submit all of their vital biographical information to the clerk, and that period would be open until the 28th, March 28th. Packets will be due from those seeking to fill Councilmember Reese's vacated seat. Between when the council receives those packets, we will have until April 7th, our work session. So we'll have a couple of weeks to read and study the packets as council members, and then come back and be prepared to whittle down the field to our finalist at our April 7th work session. At that time, or before that time, we didn't fill in these dates because I want to have some discussion with the council. We need to determine when we want to conduct interviews and to conduct our final vote. And one of the dates proposed was that April 21st work session, or a special meeting. We can also call special meetings to do interviews and our vote. So.
Sorry, I just had a clarifying question. Sure. Mm-hmm. Are you suggesting we do the interviews at the work session or special meeting? I was confused on that. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, at the April 7th work session, we will whittle down to our finalists. Okay. Then we need to determine when we would like to conduct interviews and our final vote, and then swear in our colleagues. So the dates that the variables we're substituting today are the notice and opening of the application process tomorrow. And Councilor O'Toole and Madam Clerk, if you need to fill in anything, please feel free, and Councilmember Johnson as well. And that period will be open until the 28th. So those are the actionable dates, those are operational dates today. And then our April 7th work session, mark your calendars, that at that time we will make our decision as to who our finalists will be, who will be invited to receive an interview at the April 7th work session. Then, and again, we need to determine then, we can either do it then or we can have some discussion now, or at a subsequent, we can, at our next work session, take a few moments to look at our calendars and determine when we want to conduct interviews and our final vote. Full disclosure, I'm scheduled to be traveling the week of April 18th. There's a work session and a vote and a council meeting the week of the 18th. I'm scheduled to be out of pocket for that entire week. But just that doesn't necessarily have to impact our decision making, but I did want to disclose that up front here. Questions, comments? Madam Clerk, was that accurate?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we had discussed leaving the notice period open from 3:11 to 3:25, and that I would provide the applications by 3:28 to council. Did you want to revise that?
No, I don't. You're right. I'm looking at the receipt of our packets as the actual closing date. My bad. March 11th through March 25th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you. Let the record reflect that the closing date for the application period will be March 25th. The council will receive packets by the 28th. So between the 25th and the 28th, that will give the clerk, thank you, Madam Clerk, time to vet and do her due diligence, and then we will receive our packets by the 28th. And then we'll have from the 28th until our April 7th work session to do our due diligence and read and all that good stuff. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for that important clarification. Councilmember Williams, were you seeking recognition?
I was just going to say, full disclosure, I am going to be out of the country the 7th through the 14th. So.
Of April?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll note that. And again, colleagues, today, what we need consent on is, or just an indication that we're receiving this, and it's okay for us to open up the notice period tomorrow through the 25th, and that we'll receive packets by the 28th. And that's what I'm seeking consent on today, Madam Mayor.
Thumbs up, everybody.
All right.
All right.
Cool. And I will report back to you, or make sure that we keep before us a need to have another discussion to schedule interviews and the final vote.
Madam Mayor. I had a quick question, and I apologize for adding this onto other matters, but it's becoming a calendar issue, knowing that Councilmember Williams is going to be out of town. Could we potentially schedule the special meeting for ARPA on Tuesday, April 5th, if folks could look at their calendars? Because I know Councilmember Williams is leaving, and then we're going to get sucked into doing the vacancy, which is also critically important, and I don't want to delay that conversation even later.
Were you thinking morning, afternoon, or?
The one thing, I'm open, because we have a council meeting on the 4th, and then the work session, and Wednesday is JCCPC, so that's why I'm doing it purely out of my own selfish.
Colleagues, just for the sake of order, so we're consenting on those dates. We've got clear, because this was the matter that I was taking care of with respect to the vacancy process. So are we clear? We've got a page break on that, on those dates, and then I'll get back to you, Madam Mayor, to Councilor O'Toole.
Yeah, the clerk had shared the proposed notice, which she's planning to publish tomorrow. In that, it was going to indicate the day that the interviews would occur. Obviously, this could be amended if that's council's choice.
I think per the discussion we just had, just amend that, and folk will be notified as to when, unless the council wants to take action today and determine when those interviews will take place, if we want to pull out calendars and do that now. But if not, if it's not the council's pleasure to do that today, just amend the announcement, the notice, and that they will be notified as to those that will receive an interview will be notified to the dates.
Just a point of clarification, or trying to see if we can do two at one time. Would it be inappropriate to have the interviews and the ARPA conversation at one special meeting? Is that would that be too much to do both? Or you have
It
one
might be a long
meeting,
meeting, but that's it.
one special meeting to handle those two matters? Would that work, Mayor Pro Tem?
I mean, we can do what we want. If depending upon when we have the meeting, it satisfies the council's desire not to have it too late. I don't know when depending on when we schedule the interview for, if that's still within what we think is an acceptable framework to take up ARPA with dispatch, then we can do that. But it's fully within our purview to do what we want.
I would just ask that the meetings be in the evening and not in the middle of the day.
Is that first week of April a possibility still before Councilman Williams goes out of town?
Well, we're not for the interviews. We're not even going to select the finalists until April 7th work session. So the interviews would be subsequent to that April 7th date.
Right, and then Councilmember Williams is out of town, and then Mayor Pro Tem is out of town, so we'd be looking towards the end of April for the interviews, so we probably do need to schedule 2 meetings.
Would it be possible?
Because of the.
Would it be possible to do like we're doing currently with appointments, to use the form to select, I guess, the folks that we're interested in having an interview with, like if the person got 2 votes or 3 votes, or some way to just make it automated so it doesn't take up hours?
Yeah, so that's happening, we're selecting the finalists on the 7th. But the interviews will have to be scheduled differently, and those will take a while. I mean, that'll be a lengthy process, depending on how many finalists we have, but.
So it then sounds like that we need to go ahead and look at a date for the ARPA conversations and a separate date for the interviews, is what I'm hearing. Right?
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question? Is having the ARPA discussion at our next work session just totally out of the question? I mean, sometimes we do have long work sessions and just, we need to get the work done. Is that totally off the table at this point?
I think for Councilman Williams and I, we had some conversations on yesterday, and we would both prefer it if we could have sometime after we come back from Florida, just to make sure that we've had an opportunity to digest things.
I would agree.
Our learning curve is a little bit slower, so in certain regards, and there are like 71 proposals, and he's a little bit like me. We're kind of anal in the regards that we want to try to make sure that we read as much as we can and part of all, so that takes a little time. So I know that both of us are planning to probably have that on those airplane trips. As we fly to Florida, that's good airplane travel reading time to kind of catch up. So we talked about it yesterday. We just need a little more time to get up to speed.
Absolutely, and I think you should take the time. I think the question that we were going to deal with at the next work session was not, it's what the work that the staff has done already, the ones that they vetted, and as to whether or not the ones that have been vetted by, not all 71, because all 71 weren't recommended for funding by staff, but the ones that were, and I forget what that number is, the ones that were vetted by staff and the work that they've done, is it possible to take action on those? The other 71, those that have been invited to reapply, the ones that we want to look at that we're holding money back for, I think definitely can be done, and you should have the time to look at those. But there are some who have already been vetted by staff that are, it's not even anywhere near 71 that are ready to go. But I mean, we should have the time you need, definitely. We don't want to make rash decisions, but if we could limit the scope of what we do, not to burden you with looking at all of those proposals by then, but just the ones that are have been vetted by staff. Is that something that Councilmember Williams and you could?
No.
Okay. All right.
Madam Mayor? So the first week of April seems like the best option for a special meeting since we'll all be in town. We do already have a business meeting that Monday and a work session that Thursday. So we'd be kind of piling it on, but if folks were available, I know Councilmember Freeman says evenings are better. We could try something Wednesday evening, Tuesday evening. I don't know if any boards and commissions meet that Wednesday. There's one that meets Tuesday. And of course, we're meeting Monday.
Tuesday evenings are bad for me.
I can do Wednesday. Wednesday is fine for me on that. What's that? Wednesday, April 6th. And then, we have a work session April 7th. Maybe we can come back that evening, I guess, to do it as well. I don't know how people feel about
We don't
that.
finish. You mean our,
Mayor, you and I have
instead of,
we have
you mean as an alternative to Wednesday, or you're saying if we didn't finish on Wednesday, we could do Thursday after?
I'm open. I'll make it work that week, whatever we need to do to make it work that week.
So yeah, I mean, if we wanted to do Wednesday, we'd need to advertise a special meeting. If we just wanted to do it, extend the work session, then we wouldn't. We would just plan to have the conversation after our, just add it to our work session agenda even, and maybe take a break in between if we felt like we needed to.
Which session are you talking about?
I'm looking at April 7th.
Okay.
What does that Wednesday look like? Let's start there. That Wednesday evening, does that work for everybody?
April 6th? Is that?
Works for me. What about you? I think everybody, just ARPA. Does that work for you, Councilman Williams?
Aren't you going to be, I thought you said you were going to be out of town. Is that April 4th? Thought you were going to be out of?
Oh, no, I'll be packing on the 6th, but I'm available to meet. I leave on the 7th.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were leaving the 4th. Got you. Okay. So Wednesday evening, the 6th for ARPA?
Yes. We'll be riding the bus that afternoon, as a matter.
Do we want to do, what time?
I'm gonna take Route 9 at 4:30, so I'll just come right back downtown. So how long, do we know how long Route 9 takes to go through?
4:30 is what we're asking for, 4:30.
She said it.
I'll take that at 4:30.
Is that,
I think we're just trying to figure out what time. So we would be downtown by like 5:30 or?
I think we'll be back in about 5:30. Probably take about an hour to do that bus ride.
We start at 6.
Does 6 sound good?
On April 6th?
April 6 o'clock.
If not, I'll call y'all to come pick me up at the bus stop.
So we can have the clerk notice that.
Yeah.
Great.
ARPA discussion.
I think you got it done.
Thank you.
That works.
3, 6. It'll be a special meeting. And did we also want to try and determine a interview date today, or just take that up on April 7th?
Probably need to do it today because
Okay.
Councilman Williams will be traveling on the 7th.
Okay. So finalists are determined
I'm
on.
okay with the consensus on that date. It's you don't have to hold it up for me to determine the interview time.
We're gonna try to make it convenient for you.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. Thanks.
When are you back, Councilman Williams?
Yeah, I land back on the
Slim.
14th, jet lag to the 15th, but I'll be available.
Well, and then Mayor Pro Tem's gone the next week, so I think we're looking at the week of the 25th of April as the first opportunity.
Give our candidates a good amount of time to get ready.
So the 28th, would that be good? If we use it's the 4th Thursday, so 1 to 4.
April 28th, I'm at the
City Vision,
African American Conference.
I'm in Wilmington.
DC.
The 26th?
I think I'm here the 26th. Let's see when the conference starts.
I'm actually I'm in Wilmington until the 28th. Councilmember,
Both of us
Mayor
are.
Pro Tem, are you there as well?
I'm in Wilmington, yeah.
Okay.
Until what date?
The 28th.
28th.
Then we have a council meeting on that, May 2nd.
What about Friday, the 22nd? Or Thursday, but that's a work session.
That's the week I'm out.
So you're out the week of the 18th to the 22nd?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
18th to the 9th, back on the 20th.
Could we do the 29th, Friday of April, the 29th? Is everyone back then?
I'm back.
The 29th.
And maybe,
I can make that work during the day, for Friday.
Yeah. I can, I can cut that conference short on that Friday. I'll just have to come back in on that Thursday, I think.
Are you in town? Or you got a
No, that's the week of the AAMA conference in DC.
What if we did the interviews, well, it depends on how busy our schedule is, I guess, how late we want to be here, but we could have the interviews at our regular meeting on Monday, May 2nd, and then swear in our new member at our work session on Thursday, May 5th.
Or we could use Tuesday, the 3rd.
Just have some coffee.
Yeah, I have. When you coming back? When are you flying back?
No, I'll be back on the 14th.
We've had midnight meetings before.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm open for on the 3rd as well.
The 3rd, May 3rd, right?
May 3rd or May 2nd, either way works.
One of our Human Relations Commission meets on the 3rd. It's not,
Okay.
It's not critical that I be there, but prefer to be there.
So
I'll make you go on work.
let's, the second Monday that night is, since we're so far out, we can maybe ask our county manager to keep in mind our agenda, since we'll have interviews that night, so we won't be here to 1. Maybe we can do our interviews first, you think? Does that work? Get them?
are we saying Monday, May 2nd, we just kind of come in early, like start at 4 instead of 7?
You've done that before.
We
I
have,
like that. Now that I like, yay.
we could do interviews starting, okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
I would say that you might want to hold the time on the 3rd as well, in case there's go over, if we have 7.
Does that give city staff enough time all the way in May so that we don't have maybe so many public hearings that evening?
I know, right?
Eventually.
Sorry.
Okay, so we'll start interviews early at 4 o'clock. Okay, that works.
4 o'clock on May 2nd?
All righty.
Madam Clerk, do you have what you need for notification purposes?
Checking.
Okay.
All right, we have our dates straight. Can somebody recite them again just to make sure the public has followed all of that, and then we'll settle our agenda.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes, ma'am.
are we having the interviews here in the chamber?
I don't know if we'll be using the conference room by then upstairs. If in the past, we've done them in the council, well, when we weren't virtual, we used the conference room upstairs on the second floor. I don't know if we'll be back there by then, but if not, I guess, well, sure, absolutely.
So we don't have, we don't have the technology to do a hybrid meeting upstairs only in this room as it relates to meeting space, if it is, if you're going to have virtual participation at all. I wanted to speak on that, and I did receive from staff that on May 2nd, we do go far out. We do have 4 public hearings on the night of May 2nd, but I don't know, the length of those hearings at this moment.
I think we could go from 4 to 6, and then on the 3rd, you can pick up. If we're doing like I think we did half-hour interviews last time, so that would cover about 4 or 5, and then you could do 2 more on the 3rd.
I think each council member had 5 minutes of questioning, and it depends upon how many applicants we have. I think we also need to factor in a public comment period as well after the interviews. So You have time for public comments after the interview. And I don't know how many applicants it's going to be, but when we whittle down on April 7th, I don't anticipate us having 7 folk that get through that April 7th process, but it might happen. And council will just have to govern ourselves accordingly. It's 5 minutes. I think in the past we've done 5 minutes of questioning each, and it went pretty quick, as I recall. And then we have time for public comments. Do we want to actually take the vote the evening of the 2nd, or do we want to?
I did have one clarifying question on your finalists, though. Did you all, in the past, did you all have a set number that you agreed would be finalists? Did you say you were going to take the top 3 or the top 4? What process did you all do? What was that process?
And Councilmember Johnson came up with a really good way to rank choice our candidates.
But everyone said it was too nerdy and didn't want to do it. So I think the way that it happened both previous times is that we scored candidates essentially, and there was a really clear breaking point for each one. So for when we appointed Councilmember Caballero, there were 7, I believe, finalists, and when we appointed Councilmember Freelon, was it 3? Yeah. So it'll kind of depend on the applicants and how people feel about them, but both times there was a very clear divide between people we wanted to advance and people who we didn't want to advance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think there were like 18 candidates and one, I don't remember which one, but there were a lot. And then the ranked choice helped us get down to 7.
And then you interviewed the 7?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so everyone had to rank everyone, or as many people as they wanted, then we added up the rankings and then put folks in order.
Gotcha.
And then did from top to bottom, so it was like a combined score for each candidate. Okay. Your ranking was however you wanted to rank them. I have a whole rubric, because I'm a nerd, which I'm happy to share with anyone who would like it.
The rubric is good. And in the past, we also had public comment that I don't know if happened before or after the interview. That I can't remember.
I think it was after.
It was right after.
I think when we appointed you, it was before, and then when we appointed Pierce, it was after, because I remember going straight, when we appointed you, I remember going straight from the interviews to the voting.
Yes.
And then there may have been some COVID-related difference when we appointed Pierce. I can't remember exactly, but I think we did it differently each time. And there were people, because when we did the first appointment, when we appointed Javiera, people came into City Hall. We had each person could bring in a certain number of supporters to speak, and we did it all in person.
That wasn't before the interview, though? I remember that night we were in here and had public comments.
I think it was before.
And we did the interviews upstairs. I think the interviews were, because I remember one of my questions, I alluded in my questioning to the candidates to some of the comments that were made in the public hearing. So I think we received public comments, and we can check the record, before the interviews.
The reason I'm asking is we're going to do a public comment period, then we have to figure out the date for that before this May, I forget what date it is that we're discussing right now.
Do we have a Monday meeting that night before the Tuesday we just proposed?
When are we trying to do something on that Monday?
Yes, with the 4 hearings, with the 4 public hearings, yes, we did.
We have a meeting on May 2nd.
I mean, we could start even earlier and just, maybe we can dedicate ourselves to an entire day's worth of city business. I mean, if we started it in the afternoon, then we'd have enough time earlier in the afternoon, we'd have enough time for public comment and interviews. Maybe we could bring in some lunch so we don't cry.
I'm not against that.
I'm not against that either.
I'm okay.
I can make that works.
So are we suggesting that on May 2nd, we will do interviews, public comment period during the council meeting, and then a regular meeting?
I was suggesting that we move the start time up by a few hours. So maybe start at 1, do public comment, then interviews, then our meeting. Maybe schedule in some breaks, bring in some food.
I think that we did I know my public comment period was in the evening so that more folks could participate. That was the issue.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's different for the interviews because it's just individual applicants who have to plan accordingly.
Right.
So could we do that part Tuesday evening, Tuesday?
Is the 19th like out of the question for May for the vote, or I'm sorry, for the when we vote as a council, like could we, is the 60 days up to the 5th? I didn't ask that question earlier.
We're not actually bound by the 60 days.
Okay.
So, I mean,
If we move to the 19th as opposed to the 5th, that would give you the 5th to do to do interviews, and then we could use that week in between for public comments. I'm just trying to say if we can push out a little bit, just even a week, that might give us some more room to play, because we're pushing everything in between these 2 weeks in April. And then there's a variety of folks out in April.
so it sounded like we were getting at least some consensus on the 2nd for at least the interviews, correct? So why don't we stick with at least the interviews on the, did we actually have public comments for peers?
Yeah.
We did?
Yeah.
When?
When did that happen? I don't remember. We did it. I remember virtually doing the interviews. I don't remember having members of the public speak on their preferred candidate.
Maybe we just had to.
We got emails.
We got a lot of emails, and I sometimes get them confused because Pierce applied when we appointed Javier as well. So I remember people coming in to speak for Pierce, but I think it was the previous
Process, right?
process.
Right.
Right. So I think we might have skipped that because of COVID concerns.
Yeah.
We just did the interviews and it was all virtual.
And the charter, we're not mandated to have the public hearing, but of course it's our tradition and our practice in Durham to have the public speak. So that may have been between COVID and the non-compulsory nature of the public hearing, that may have been our out for Pierce. But now that I'm thinking about it, I don't recall us having a public comment period for Pierce.
Well, as a participant in that process, there were, I remember we had folks emailing in, but there was no public comment.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think it's important that we have one. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't. Okay, so we're back to Monday, May 2nd, or it's our pleasure.
So bad. I mean, we could do the public comment that Tuesday or Wednesday if we wanted to keep fidelity with our 60-day charter requirement
In the evening?
in the evening, and then we vote at the work session and swear in the new member at the work session, and they can get started.
I know that Councilmember Freeman has said something about pushing back. My only concern is I do want to give that person who has to vote on a budget if we're pushing way late into May, we're kind of giving them an unfair ask, which is vote on a big thing that you've only had like 2 weeks to look at, or, I don't know.
I'm going to hope that they're following along now.
I am too, but.
Yeah.
We can hope, but we cannot require.
So for the
We say
public.
Tuesday evening for the public, for the public comments.
Wednesday is better for me, but I can make Tuesday
I
work.
can make Wednesday work too.
I can make Wednesday work.
Wednesday, May 4th?
Public hearing.
You're going to make me miss 2 EA.
And then Thursday, we'll suspend the rules and vote. And Madam Mayor, you said the 4th works for you? Wednesday, the 4th works for you?
Let's see. I know
We do
I'm traveling.
Tuesday instead of Wednesday.
Here we go with the travel again. I know I'm traveling. Oh gosh, am I traveling on that Thursday? I think I'm traveling that Thursday. I'll verify. I'm headed to Morocco for a 60th birthday present.
All right. Is that near Burlington?
Nah,
The other Morocco.
the other Morocco.
So the 4th is no good for you, Madam Mayor?
4th is great. I can do the 4th. It's the 5th. I'm traveling on the 5th, so the 4th is fine.
Oh, the 5th is the vote. Okay.
So you'll be missing that work session?
Possibly.
Okay.
Well, you know what, if we can vote it's a special meeting, a called meeting, we can vote the evening of the public comments, after the public comments, we
That
can.
would be great.
Yep,
vote
we
then.
can do that.
I would just ask that it's on Tuesday and not Wednesday again. I'm missing a EAB meeting for the ARPA conversation in April. I don't want to miss 2 of them in a row.
We're saying May the 3rd?
Yes.
May the 3rd?
Interview second, May the 3rd, public comment and the vote.
That works for me.
Great.
All
What
right.
time on the 3rd?
At what time?
I think we got something.
Is the evenings,
Yeah.
folks say starting 6? Is 6 o'clock for starting public comments on the 3rd?
We're going to have dinner ready for all our guests.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, that's
All right, 6 o'clock. And Monday, we're starting interviews. Did we say 4?
Yes.
4K. Interviews Monday, 4. Tuesday, public comment and the vote, Tuesday the 3rd. Okay. Madam Clerk, did you capture that?
I do have a question. Did you want to have finalist interviews?
That's going to be on Monday, the 2nd at 4 p.m.
Okay, those are the 3 to 7, but did you want to whittle down from the 3 to 7?
No.
No, okay, okay.
And then the public hearing and vote will be on Tuesday, starting at 6 p.m. So if you'll notice that. Or incorporate that into the, however you see fit into your announcement that's going out tomorrow.
All right, I think we did it.
Is that it?
I think we did it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll yield it back to you.
I think we did. And I'm going to turn it over to our city manager to settle the agenda.
There was one other, I'm sorry, the clerk had one other matter, the attendance thing.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yes,
Should we
ma'am.
review the schedule? I have April 6th, there's a special meeting with ARPA. April 7th, we are selecting the candidates, 3 to 7 of them. On May 2nd, we'll conduct interviews starting at 4 p.m. And then on Tuesday, May 3rd, we will start the public comment and then vote on the final recommendation for the vacancy. And that starts at 6 p.m.
I think that's right. And we don't have to mention 3 to 7 in your notice we don't know how many it's going to be for your public notice.
Okay.
Well, you all send
That's
an
in the
email.
notice, but it can be removed.
Okay.
And Mayor Pro Tem and Madam Clerk, if you all could just email us so everybody will have it on an email.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. We're still turning it over to you for, I think you wanted a discussion on the attendance policy. Turn it back to the experts again in this arena and dealing with these situations. Anybody have any comment?
Is this about the absences? I'm fine with leaving the policy alone for now and seeing how many folks actually decide to come back in person. Because we were saying we're leaving it up to each individual board or commission, correct, to make a decision? Because I feel like if an overwhelming amount choose to come back in person, then I do think we need to return back to our previous absence policy. But if it's not that many, I don't see the point in putting that policy back in place. I'm sorry.
Thanks.
I just wanted to remind council that the ability for public bodies, which also includes our boards and commissions, is regulated by statute. And one thing I think we need to keep in mind is the governor does still have an emergency order in place, even though it doesn't include masking requirements. And that's what allows local governments to continue to have remote meetings. I did notice in the paper today that obviously, the legislature is going to go out for a very short period. The next session is supposed to start April 4th. I noticed that there was a letter to the editor in the newspaper today, a legislator saying that he wants the governor to pull back the emergency order. So I don't know what the governor will do with that. But just, I say that by way that if the governor gets rid of that order, then there is no ability to have remote meetings anymore. The other thing, and this is something that we've talked extensively with TS and staff, is it's really complicated to do hybrid meetings, as council knows, and so there's limited availability to do that. So I do think it's going to be a little complicated for all of the boards to be making independent decisions about whether they're meeting live, remotely, are some of the members going to be remote, some live? I just think there'll be chaos if it's sort of left like that.
Can you give us some guidance?
I mean, I really think the city should determine, looking at the health metrics, whether it wants boards and commissions to continue to operate remotely as long as the order is still in place, or whether we want the boards and commissions to come back live, as council has decided to do.
I would think that as long as the order's in place, that's my first guess.
I think I heard what the attorney said, but there's never an opportunity for the boards and commissions to do hybrid.
Right.
So that is, I'm just making that part of what you said clear. So as long as that order is in place, as you had mentioned, they can do virtual or they can do in person, but we don't have the technology to allow hybrid except for in this room.
So you all have some idea. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Freeman.
You're fine. I thank you, Madam Mayor. I just would want to say that I think it's important to keep it clear if we're going to stick with virtual or in person, the work still has to get covered. So the boards and commissions that are meeting specifically that has business to attend to, I would prefer that they be in person and that they actually, because I'm just starting to feel like the work, especially for some of the cases where landlords aren't willing to come in or not willing to do the meetings virtually, or even on the vice versa where tenants or folks not willing to do a virtual meeting. This is starting to get to be backed up. And so I do want to make sure that we're not missing that there is a need to actually be in person for some of these boards and committees. And so them being in person and having adequate quorum is important. And so I think that the attendance policy needs to reflect that we need folks to attend. There are some boards and committees that aren't doing business where I think there could be some denotation where it's more ceremonial, so to speak, or there's some things that are happening that they're planning. It's different. But for those boards where we need advisory, actual like staff is included and staff is working on a plan or trying to get work done, I think it's important that they are in person and that attendance does matter. It is counted because at some point we're going to start to see folks using the fact that we didn't have meetings as excuses for the things that aren't done. And I think we're starting to see that as well. So I'm very cognizant that some folks are immunocompromised, have not had the vaccine, and maybe they need to withdraw from being on the board, but I do want to make sure that we're accounting for all of the different metrics, I guess, for each of our boards, and maybe that needs to be accounted for in the decision in some way, shape, or form. Thank you.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you. So I may be trying to avoid something which is unavoidable. It might just be the way we live for a while is we move to virtual if numbers go high and we go back in person if numbers go low, and things are going to kind of go up and down. But I think it would be easier if we maintain our current policy until the state of emergency is lifted And then we're required to go back to in-person, because I would like to, if possible, avoid a situation where we ask everybody to come back in person and then we have another variant spike and we tell everybody they have to go back virtual. And then I feel like the back and forth will get confusing, as well as technically complicated for staff that are trying to manage either an in-person or a virtual meeting, dependent on metrics which we don't know where they're going to go. So to me, I feel like the easiest thing is to just leave things how they are until that point at which the governor lifts the state of emergency. Though I do recognize the concerns with, for example, the Board of Adjustment and the Housing Appeals Board, which we've heard about from staff, that not having in-person meetings has been challenging to advance work. But I think that on balance, that it would be better to keep the current policy for the time being.
And I promise I won't talk this much moving forward. But for what it's worth, just to provide just clarity on where, just to help you make a decision, Mayor. For anyone that is immunocompromised, I think that's part of mitigating safety. So I think that, I would ask each board, or committee or commission to, if there is someone, to, just please let us know and we could determine those special situations. Otherwise, I think that we need to, one, lead by example. Two, I think that we need to ensure that we have all of the resources available for any governing body to meet, such as having masks, ensuring that they have access to vaccines, boosters, all of the practices that are keeping us safe. And if we can provide all of those resources, then I think the work of the people should continue forward. And if there's anyone that's immunocompromised but would still like to be involved, then we can handle those as a special case if possible. So I'm not sure what the policy is, but I do support the commission, the committees, and boards doing what we're doing, and that is coming back in person.
So what we have now is a still standing order from our governor, and that is going to be under review. So what I hear.
And I should add, this is once the order is lifted, not right now. Sorry about that.
Right. So I would think that we should follow the governor's order and remain virtual, and once it's lifted, then we will revisit.
I think she was asking specifically about attendance, and that was why I was.
In terms of attendance, since we're following the same order, that does not change as well, which means that your attendance is not counted at this point, correct? Oh, right. All right, so we're still continuing the status quo until it's lifted. All righty. Madam Manager.
Good afternoon again, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. I have for your council meeting for consent items 1 through 7, and public GBA public hearings items 10 through 12.
I'm now ready to entertain a motion to settle our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Right, I heard two voices at one time. Councilman Williams has made the motion. Councilwoman Johnson has seconded. We will conduct our vote verbally with an aye. If you would call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Mayor O'Neill,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
and Councilmember Williams.
Aye.
Thank you.
The ayes have it, and we have now settled our agenda. Are there any other items to come before this council on this Thursday afternoon? Well, all righty then. Well, now, if not, this meeting is adjourned at 4:07 on March the 10th, 2022. Bull City strong.